When a nurse named Elena saw Michael Jordan walk through the hospital doors at 2:47 in the morning, she knew something incredible was about to happen. But what she didn't know was that she would have to keep this secret for 28 years. It was October 17th, 1995. The Chicago Bulls Blood Donation Center was empty and quiet. Elena was finishing her shift when a black car pulled up outside. A tall man stepped out wearing a baseball cap and sunglasses, even though it was the middle of the night. The man walked in and put his finger to his lips. "I'm just donor flight 23 tonight," he said quietly. Elena's heart stopped. Standing in front of her was Michael Jordan, the most famous basketball player in the world. But he wasn't there for himself. He was there to save the life of an 8-year-old girl named Sarah Chen, who was dying from a rare blood disease. Here's the thing that made this story even more amazing. Michael Jordan wasn't even supposed to be a match for Sarah's blood type. Doctors had tested him weeks before and said his blood wouldn't work. But Michael refused to give up. What Michael did next was something most people thought was impossible. He spent weeks changing his diet and taking special vitamins, trying to make his own blood compatible with Sarah's. He got tested over and over again, hoping for a miracle. And on October 16th, just one day before Sarah would run out of time, the impossible happened. Michael's blood had changed. He could now save her life. But there was one problem. Michael had the flu. He had a fever of 102 degrees. The nurse tried to stop him. "You're sick," she said. "This could be dangerous for you." Michael looked at her with tears in his eyes. "Sarah doesn't have time for me to get better. She needs blood now." So at 2:47 in the morning, while fighting the flu, Michael Jordan donated blood to save a little girl he had never met. And then he asked Elena to make him a promise that would change everything. "Don't tell anyone I was here," Michael said. "Let Sarah think it was an anonymous stranger. I don't want her to grow up as the girl Michael Jordan saved. I want her to be her own hero." Elena kept that promise for 28 years. She watched Sarah grow up, become a doctor, and save hundreds of other children. All while Sarah had no idea that her childhood hero had literally given his blood to save her life. But why did Michael Jordan keep this amazing act of kindness a secret for so long? What happened when Sarah finally learned the truth? And what did Michael say that made the nurse cry when she finally told this story? Watch this whole video to find out how one letter written in purple crayon by a dying 8-year-old girl led to one of the most beautiful secrets in sports history. You won't believe what happens next. Elena Martinez sat in her small Chicago apartment, sunlight streaming through the window and landing on an old hospital badge from 1995. Her hands, wrinkled now at 62, trembled slightly as she picked up the faded ID card. The photo showed a younger woman with dark hair and hopeful eyes, a woman who didn't yet carry the weight of the secret she'd held for 28 years. On the table beside her lay a worn leather journal, its pages yellowed and soft from age. She'd written in it only once, on a single October night that changed everything she understood about greatness. "I've kept this quiet for so long," Elena whispered to herself, though no one else was in the room. Maybe too long. She opened the journal carefully, as if the pages might crumble at her touch. The date at the top read October 17th, 1995, 2:47 a.m. Below it, written in hurried handwriting, were words she'd memorized long ago. Michael Jordan just walked through the door. For nearly 3 decades, Elena had watched the world celebrate Michael Jordan. She'd seen his championships, his Hall of Fame induction, his legendary status grow with each passing year. The world knew him as the greatest basketball player who ever lived. But Elena knew something else. She knew about a night when greatness had nothing to do with basketball. The world talked about Michael's 6 championship rings. Elena remembered his blood type. They discussed his competitive fire. She remembered his quiet compassion. They analyzed his jump shot. She remembered him wincing in pain as he rolled up his sleeve. "It's time," Elena said firmly, closing the journal and holding it against her chest. "People need to understand what really makes someone great." She thought about Sarah Chen, the reason this story existed at all. An 8-year-old girl who'd written one desperate letter. A grandmother who'd prayed for a miracle. A hospital room covered in Michael Jordan posters, and blood. Rare, precious, life-saving blood that came from an anonymous donor in the middle of the night. But the story wasn't just about blood. It was about a promise Michael had made Elena keep. A promise that had felt impossible at times. How many moments had she wanted to speak? How many times had reporters asked about famous donors? How many nights had she lain awake, wondering if silence was the same as lying? What Michael did that night? Elena paused, her voice catching. She was practicing for the interview she'd finally agreed to give, rehearsing words that had lived only in her mind for so long. It wasn't just about blood. It was about a promise he made to someone he'd never met. And by the time you understand why he came, you'll understand what true greatness really means. She stood and walked to her bedroom closet, reaching up to the top shelf. Her fingers found a small wooden box she hadn't opened in years. On inside was a newspaper clipping from November 1995. Local girl beats rare blood disorder. Anonymous donor saves life. The photo showed Sarah Chen, tiny and frail in a hospital bed, smiling weakly at the camera. Her grandmother stood beside her, one hand raised toward heaven in gratitude. Elena had cut out that article and saved it, unable to tell the grandmother that she knew exactly who'd saved Sarah's life. Unable to say that the anonymous donor was the most famous athlete in the world, who'd driven to the hospital alone, without security or fanfare, while fighting the flu. "Sarah Chen," Elena said aloud, testing the name on her lips. Everything started because of an 8-year-old girl who wrote one letter. But she wouldn't explain that yet. Not fully. Because to understand October 17, 1995, you had to understand July 1995. While you had to understand a little girl's desperation, a grandmother's faith, and a letter that should have been lost in a pile of 10,000 others. You had to understand why Michael Jordan read that letter 3 times, why he made phone calls at midnight, why he organized a blood drive that nobody knew about, why he tested his blood again and again, hoping for a miracle of compatibility, why he came to the hospital at 2:47 in the morning, alone and sick, to keep a promise to a child he'd never met. Elena placed the newspaper clipping back in the box and returned it to the shelf. She sat down at her kitchen table, opened her laptop, and began to type. To understand that night, she wrote, "I need to take you back to where it all began, 3 months earlier." Her fingers paused over the keyboard. And then she began to tell the story the world had waited 28 years to hear. July 1995. Chicago's Lakeview neighborhood sweltered under a merciless summer sun. Inside a small brick house on Oakdale Avenue, 8-year-old Sarah Chen sat at her grandmother's kitchen table, a blank piece of notebook paper in front of her, and a purple crayon clutched in her small hand. "Grammy, how do you spell special?" Sarah asked, her voice weak and thin. Margaret Chen looked up from the dishes she was washing. Her granddaughter looked so small sitting there, her legs dangling from the chair, her skin pale despite the summer heat. Dark circles shadowed Sarah's eyes that used to sparkle with mischief, but now mostly showed exhaustion. "Special," Margaret said gently, drying her hands on a dish towel. "What are you writing? So sweet girl?" "A letter to Michael Jordan," Sarah replied, carefully forming each letter. Her hand shook slightly from weakness, making the words wobbly and uneven. Margaret's heart clenched. Sarah had been writing letters to Michael Jordan since she was 6 years old, before the accident that took her parents, before the diagnosis that changed everything. The Bulls' superstar had become Sarah's hero, her inspiration, her reason to keep fighting when her body wanted to give up. The walls of Sarah's bedroom were covered with Michael Jordan posters, number 23 in mid-flight, tongue out, defying gravity, championship celebrations, magazine covers. Sarah had watched every Bulls game she could, even from her hospital bed, clutching her worn basketball and pretending she could fly like him. But this letter was different. Margaret could see it in the way Sarah bit her lip, concentrating so hard on each word. 2 weeks ago, Dr. Patel had delivered news that made Margaret's world stop spinning. Sarah's rare blood disorder, a condition she'd been managing for 3 years, had taken a dangerous turn. The treatments weren't working anymore. Sarah needed blood transfusions, but not just any blood. She needed an extremely rare type called the Bombay blood group. So rare that only about 4 people in every million had it. "We're searching every registry we can access," Dr. Patel had explained, his kind eyes filled with concern. But in Sarah's ethnic background, the odds are even lower. Maybe 1 in 10,000. "We need to find compatible donors quickly, Mrs. Chen. Within weeks, not months." Margaret had nodded, unable to speak, holding Sarah's hand as the doctor outlined their options. Clinical trials, experimental treatments, hope wrapped in medical terminology she didn't fully understand. That night, Margaret had prayed harder than she'd ever prayed in her life. She'd lost her son and daughter-in-law 2 years ago when a drunk driver ran a red light. She couldn't lose Sarah, too. She wouldn't survive it. Now, watching her granddaughter labor over this letter, Margaret felt tears threaten to spill. Sarah still believed in heroes, still believed that good things happen to people who tried hard enough, still believed that Michael Jordan, who never gave up on the court, could somehow help her not give up either. "What are you telling him?" Margaret asked softly, sitting down beside Sarah. Sarah looked up, her thin face serious. "I'm not asking him to visit me. Scrammy. I know he's really busy. And I'm not asking for an autograph or tickets or anything like that." "What are you asking for then?" Sarah's eyes filled with tears, but she blinked them back. At 8 years old, she'd learned not to cry about her illness. Crying scared Grammy, and Grammy was the only person she had left in the world. "I'm asking him to help find blood donors," Sarah whispered. "Dr. Patel says I need special blood. Mr. Jordan is really good at impossible shots. Maybe he's good at impossible things too." Margaret's throat tightened. She pulled Sarah into a gentle hug, careful not to squeeze too hard. Sarah's bones felt fragile, like a small bird's. "That's very smart, sweetheart," Margaret managed to say. "Very smart." Sarah pulled back and returned to her letter, purple crayon moving slowly across the page. And Margaret watched over her shoulder as the words took shape. "Dear Mr. Jordan, my name is Sarah. I am 8 years old. I am sick and need special blood that is hard to find. The doctors are looking, but they need help. You are the greatest because you never give up. Even when the other team is winning, you keep trying. You make impossible shots. Can you help me find people who won't give up on me either? People who have the special blood I need? I watch you play basketball and it makes me feel like I can be strong too. You teach me that anything is possible if you don't give up. Thank you for reading my letter. Love, Sarah. At the bottom, Sarah drew a basketball with her purple crayon, then added stars around it. Her signature was shaky, but determined. "There," Sarah said, setting down the crayon. "Do you think he'll read it? Grammy?" Margaret wanted to be honest. She wanted to prepare Sarah for the likelihood that this letter would never reach Michael Jordan's hands, that it would be filed away with thousands of other fan letters, that even if he did see it, he was just one man who couldn't solve every problem. But looking at her granddaughter's hopeful face, at those eyes that had seen too much suffering for 8 years, Margaret couldn't bring herself to dim that small light of hope. "I think," Margaret said carefully, "that you wrote a beautiful letter, and tomorrow we'll put it in the mail. And then we'll see what happens. We have to believe, right, Grammy?" Sarah's voice was so small, so full of faith. "Like you always say, we have to believe in miracles." "Yes, baby," Margaret whispered, kissing the top of Sarah's head. "Or we have to believe." That evening, Margaret addressed an envelope to the Chicago Bulls office. She didn't know the exact address, so she looked it up in the phone book, writing carefully to make sure every letter was legible. She wanted whoever received this letter to take it seriously, to see that it came from real people with a real need. On the back of the envelope, she wrote their return address. Then, in the corner, she added 3 words in her careful handwriting: urgent, medical. Maybe it would help. Maybe someone would see those words and pay attention. Maybe. The next morning, Margaret and Sarah walked 3 blocks to the post office. Sarah insisted on carrying the letter herself, clutching it like it contained all her hopes. At the mailbox, she stood on tiptoes and pushed the envelope through the slot. "Bye, letter," Sarah whispered. "Please, find Mr. Jordan." Margaret held Sarah's hand as they walked home slowly. Sarah tired easily these days, needing to rest every few minutes. By the time they reached their house, Sarah was exhausted and went straight to bed for a nap. Margaret sat in her kitchen alone, staring at nothing, praying to a God she hoped was listening. The letter traveled through the postal system, one white envelope among millions. It arrived at the Chicago Bulls office 3 days later, in July 1995, when Michael Jordan was at the absolute peak of his powers and fame. It landed in a mailroom where a young man named Marcus Webb sorted through an endless flood of fan mail. 10,000 letters arrived every week. 10,000 pleas for autographs, tickets, donations, appearances. And 10,000 people who wanted a piece of Michael Jordan's time, his attention, his magic. Sarah's letter should have disappeared into that flood, should have received a form letter response and a photocopied signature, should have been forgotten. But Marcus Webb had a 6-year-old daughter named Jessica. 3 years ago, Jessica had fought leukemia. She'd needed blood transfusions, bone marrow, miracles. She'd survived, but those months had aged Marcus a lifetime. He remembered the desperation, the fear, the feeling of helplessness as he watched his daughter suffer. When Marcus opened Sarah's envelope and read her letter, his hands began to shake. He read it once, twice, 3 times. Then Marcus Webb did something he'd never done in 2 years of working in the Bulls' mailroom. Something that was against protocol, and something that could get him fired. He walked past his supervisor's office. He climbed the stairs to the executive level. He walked directly to the office of Denise Freeman, Michael Jordan's personal assistant, and he knocked on her door. Denise Freeman looked up from her desk, surprised to see a mailroom clerk standing in her doorway. In the 2 years she'd worked as Michael Jordan's personal assistant, not once had someone from the mailroom bypassed every level of protocol to reach her office. "Can I help you?" she asked, eyebrows raised. Marcus Webb shifted nervously, Sarah's letter clutched in his hand. "Miss Freeman, I know I'm not supposed to be here. I know there's a process for fan mail, but I need you to give this letter to Mr. Jordan, directly to him. Not in a pile, not with a summary. And he needs to read it himself." Denise set down her pen. She received dozens of requests like this every week. Everyone thought their letter was special, urgent, deserving of Michael's personal attention. She'd learned to be firm but kind in these situations. "I appreciate your concern," she said, "but Mr. Jordan receives thousands of letters. We have a system." "My daughter had leukemia," Marcus interrupted, his voice breaking slightly. 3 years ago, she needed blood transfusions. She almost died." He held up Sarah's letter. "This little girl is dying. She's not asking for an autograph. She's asking for help finding blood donors. Please, just read it." Something in Marcus's eyes made Denise pause. She'd worked with enough desperate people to recognize genuine anguish when she saw it. She held out her hand. Marcus gave her the letter, his hand trembling slightly. Denise read Sarah's words, written in purple crayon with a child's unsteady hand. She read about the special blood, about not giving up, about believing in impossible things. She saw the basketball drawing with stars around it. She noticed the shaky signature. When she looked up, her professional mask had cracked. "How did this come to you?" "Random sorting," Marcus said quietly. "I open maybe 300 letters a day. But when I saw urgent, medical on the back, and then read what was inside..." He swallowed hard. "I remembered sitting in a hospital room with my Jessica, praying for strangers to donate blood, to be tested, to care about a little girl they'd never met. Some of them did. That's why Jessica is alive today." Denise read the letter again, more slowly this time. 8 years old. It's a rare blood disorder, running out of time. "I'll make sure he sees it," she said finally. "Tonight. I promise you that." Marcus's shoulders sagged with relief. "Thank you. Thank you so much." After Marcus left, Denise sat alone with Sarah's letter. She'd fielded thousands of requests in her time working for Michael. Charities, sick children, worthy causes, everyone who wanted a piece of his time and generosity. Michael gave to many of them, more than the public ever knew. But he was also careful. Fame meant that people constantly tried to use his name, his money, his influence. Still, something about this letter felt different. It wasn't manipulative. It wasn't professionally crafted by a charity's PR team. It was just a scared little girl asking a hero for help the only way she knew how. That evening, after a grueling practice session, Michael Jordan sat alone in his office at the United Center. It was nearly 9 o'clock. Most of the staff had gone home. The building was quiet, except for the distant sounds of cleaning crews. Michael liked these moments of solitude. During the day, he belonged to everyone, teammates, coaches, media, fans. But late at night, in the silence of his office, he could just be himself. He was exhausted. The 1994-95 season had been challenging after his return from baseball. Now, summer training was intense as he prepared for the upcoming season. At 32 years old, his body demanded more recovery time than it used to. He felt every practice, every game, every year. A knock on his door interrupted his thoughts. "Come in," he called. Denise entered, holding a single piece of paper. "I know you're tired, but I need you to read something before you leave tonight." Michael gestured to the chair across from his desk. "What is it?" "A letter from a fan. An 8-year-old girl named Sarah Chen." Michael sighed. "Denise, we talked about this. I can't personally respond to every—" "Just read it," Denise said gently, placing the letter on his desk. "Please." There was something in her tone that made Michael pick up the letter instead of arguing. He began reading Sarah's words, written in purple crayon. He read it once, his expression neutral. Then he read it again, more slowly. Then a third time. The silence stretched for nearly a minute. Denise watched as Michael's jaw tightened, as he swallowed hard, as his fingers traced the edge of the paper. "Where does she live?" Michael asked quietly. "Chicago, Lakeview neighborhood. The return address is on the envelope." "What do we know about her situation? Is this legitimate?" "I don't know yet. But Marcus Webb, the mailroom clerk who brought it to me, said his daughter had leukemia. He recognized the desperation in the letter. He believed it was real." Michael set the letter down carefully, as if it might break. He leaned back in his chair and closed his eyes. Denise waited. She'd learned that Michael needed space to process things, especially things that touched him emotionally. "My mother almost died when I was 12, Michael said finally, eyes still closed. "Internal bleeding. She needed transfusions. I remember sitting in that hospital waiting room, terrified, feeling completely helpless. Some stranger donated blood that saved her life. I never found out who it was." He opened his eyes and looked at Denise. "No, I've never forgotten that feeling. Knowing that someone I'd never met cared enough about another human being to give part of themselves. No cameras, no credit, just because it was the right thing to do." "What do you want me to do?" Denise asked. Michael picked up the letter again, studying Sarah's drawing of the basketball with stars. "Find out everything about Sarah Chen, her medical condition, what she needs, whether this is real. Do it quietly. No press, no announcements. Just get me facts. And if it's real, then we help her." Michael's voice was firm. "But, Denise, this stays between us. I don't want this becoming a media story. This isn't about Michael Jordan helping a sick kid. This is about a little girl who needs blood donors. And if I can help make that happen, we will." Over the next week, Denise made careful inquiries. She called Chicago Memorial Hospital, claiming to be from a private foundation reviewing potential cases for assistance. She spoke with Dr. Raj Patel, Sarah's primary physician. The picture that emerged broke her heart. Sarah Chen, 8 years old, orphaned 2 years ago in a car accident, raised by her grandmother on a fixed income, diagnosed with a rare blood disorder that required increasingly frequent transfusions. Her condition had recently worsened, and she needed blood with the Bombay blood group, extraordinarily rare, especially in her ethnic background. "We're searching every registry we have access to," Dr. Patel had explained, "but we need more donors to test. The more people we screen, the better chance we have of finding compatible matches. Time is critical. Without transfusions, Sarah has weeks, maybe a month." Denise reported everything to Michael. They sat in his office late one evening, the gravity of the situation settling over them. "She's running out of time," Denise said quietly. Michael was silent for a long moment, staring at Sarah's letter, which he'd kept on his desk all week. Finally, he spoke. "Test my blood. See if I'm compatible." "Michael, do it quietly. I'll go to a private lab. Don't use my name. Just test me." "And if you're not a match?" Michael's jaw set in that determined way Denise had seen countless times on the basketball court. Then, I'll find people who are. I'll organize a blood drive, bring in donors, screen everyone we can. But it has to be done quietly, Denise. No publicity, no press releases, no using my name to make this about me. Why? Denise asked. You could raise awareness. It'd get thousands of people to donate. Because Sarah wrote to me asking for help finding donors, not asking to be saved by Michael Jordan, he interrupted. If I make this public, her story becomes about me. She becomes the girl Michael Jordan helped. I don't want that for her. I want her to beat this and live her life without being defined by my involvement. Denise nodded slowly, understanding. When do you want to be tested? Tomorrow. Set it up. 3 days later, the results came back. Michael sat in Denise's office as she delivered the news, her face apologetic. You're not compatible. Your blood type isn't a match for what Sarah needs. Michael absorbed this in silence. He'd been so certain, so hopeful, that maybe he could be the direct solution. The disappointment was sharp and immediate. Okay, he said finally. Then we moved to Plan B. Which is? Michael stood up, his mind already working through possibilities. We organize the biggest private blood drive Chicago has ever seen. We test everyone we can. We find donors who match, and we make sure Sarah Chen gets the blood she needs. How do we do that without attracting media attention? Carefully. Michael began pacing, the same way he'd walk the sidelines during timeouts, thinking through strategy. I'll make personal calls to people I trust, business leaders, other athletes, friends. I'll explain the situation and ask them to help organize and fund this quietly. No press releases, just word of mouth. We'll rent a facility, bring in medical staff, and screen as many people as we can. That will be expensive. I'll cover it, whatever it costs. Denise made notes on already mentally organizing logistics. This will take weeks to arrange. Then we start today, Michael said. Sarah doesn't have time to waste, neither do we. As Michael left her office, Denise called after him. You know, most people would just write a check to a charity and move on. Michael paused in the doorway, Sarah's letter still in his hand. Sarah didn't write to me asking for money. She asked me not to give up on her. So I won't. He walked out into the Chicago night, already making a mental list of the first 20 people he would call. Behind him, Denise sat at her desk, looking at the notes she'd taken. She'd worked with Michael Jordan for 2 years, had seen his competitive fire, his drive, his intensity. But this was different. This was a kind of determination she'd never witnessed before. And this wasn't about winning a championship. This was about saving a life. And Michael Jordan, she realized, approached it with the same fierce commitment he brought to every impossible shot he'd ever taken. Michael Jordan sat in his home office at midnight, a list of names in front of him and a phone in his hand. Outside, Chicago slept, but inside, Michael was just beginning his work. The first call was to David Chen, a real estate mogul who'd grown up in Chicago's Chinatown and now owned half the commercial buildings in the Loop. Michael had met him at a charity event 2 years ago. They weren't close friends, but they'd connected over their shared understanding of what it meant to overcome obstacles. David, it's Michael Jordan. I know it's late. There was a brief pause, then David's surprised voice. Michael, is everything okay? I need your help with something private. Can I trust you to keep this between us? Of course. Michael explained Sarah's situation, not mentioning her by name, just the facts. An 8-year-old girl, orphaned, dying from a rare blood disorder. The desperate need for donors with an extraordinarily rare blood type. The race against time. "I want to organize a private blood drive," Michael said. "Large-scale, professional, but completely quiet. No media, no publicity. I'm calling people I trust to help fund it and spread the word through their networks. Will you help?" David didn't hesitate. "What do you need?" "Money for medical staff and equipment. Space to hold the drives." He helped contacting people in the Chinese-American community. The girl's ethnic background means donors with similar heritage have better odds of matching. "Consider it done. How much do you need?" "Whatever it takes." "I'll make calls tomorrow. Quietly, like you said." "Michael, this is a good thing you're doing." "I'm not doing anything yet," Michael replied. "We're all doing this together. That's the point." The second call was to Patricia Williams, a hospital administrator he'd met during a Bulls charity visit to Children's Memorial. The third was to James Martinez, who owned a medical supply company. The fourth was to Reverend Thompson from a South Side church, who had connections throughout Chicago's community networks. Each conversation followed the same pattern. Michael explained the situation, emphasized the need for absolute privacy, and asked for help. Every person said yes. By 3 in the morning, Michael had made 19 calls. His voice was hoarse, his coffee cold, but momentum was building. A network of Chicago's most connected citizens was quietly mobilizing around a little girl they'd never met. Meanwhile, across the city, Elena Martinez was finishing her shift at Chicago Memorial Hospital's blood donation center. She'd been a nurse for 7 years, and the night shift suited her. The work was quieter, more intimate. Donors who came at night often had their own stories. Insomniacs who wanted to do something meaningful. Night shift workers who couldn't come during the day. People who preferred privacy. Elena was organizing supply cabinets when her supervisor, Linda Chen, called her into the office. "We've been selected to coordinate a special project," Linda explained, looking at a memo that had apparently arrived that day. "A private foundation is funding a large-scale blood drive specifically to test for rare blood types. They want to use our facility." "Which foundation?" Elena asked. "It's anonymous. The funding comes through a law firm, but it's legitimate. The money has already been transferred to the hospital's account. They want to run the drive over 3 days in late September." "That's unusual. Why private?" Linda shrugged. "The memo says the foundation prefers to work without publicity. Apparently, they're specifically looking for the Bombay blood group and other rare types. They're bringing in specialized testing equipment and additional medical staff. Our job is to coordinate logistics and provide the facility." Elena made notes, her mind already working through what would be needed. "How many people are they expecting?" "They're hoping for 500 over the 3 days. Maybe more." Elena's eyebrows rose. "That's ambitious for a private drive with no advertising." "They're using word-of-mouth networks, community organizations, churches, business groups. No posters, no media coverage, just personal invitations." As Linda continued explaining the logistics, Elena felt a strange sense that something important was happening. In 7 years of nursing, she'd never seen anything quite like this. A fully funded, professionally organized blood drive operating entirely in the shadows. "Who's the patient?" Elena asked. "The one who needs the rare blood?" Linda consulted the memo. "So, it doesn't say." "Patient privacy, I assume. We're just told that there's an urgent medical need, and that every compatible donor we find could save a life." Elena nodded, accepting this. In medicine, privacy was sacred. Still, she couldn't shake her curiosity about who had the resources and the will to organize something like this so quietly. The answer, of course, was Michael Jordan, but his name appeared on no documents, no memos, no funding transfers. He'd structured everything through lawyers and trusted intermediaries, keeping himself invisible. Over the next 6 weeks, Michael's underground network grew. Word spread through Chicago's communities like ripples in water. Quiet, steady, reaching farther than anyone expected. In Chinatown, David Chen spoke to restaurant owners and shopkeepers. "There's a private blood drive coming, and a child needs help. Pass the word." On the South Side, Reverend Thompson mentioned it during Sunday service. Sometimes God asks us to help in small ways that matter more than we know. There's a blood drive in September. Consider giving an hour of your time. In corporate offices downtown, executives received personal calls from colleagues. "Someone is organizing something good. Bring your employees. Tell your friends." Marcus Webb, the mailroom clerk who'd started everything, heard about the drive through his church. He immediately signed up, and he brought 10 friends with him. He didn't know Michael Jordan was behind it, but he hoped somehow it might help the little girl whose letter had moved him so deeply. Sarah Chen knew nothing about any of this. Through July and August, her condition continued to deteriorate, and she spent more days in the hospital than at home. Dr. Patel tried different treatments, buying time, but they all knew what Sarah really needed. Margaret sat by her granddaughter's bed every day, reading to her, praying, maintaining hope even when it felt impossible. Sarah never asked if Michael Jordan had received her letter. Maybe she was afraid of the answer. Maybe she'd already accepted that some heroes lived only on posters and TV screens. But she still watched Bulls games when she had the strength. She still wore her number 23 jersey. She still believed, in the way only children can, that somehow things would work out. The blood drive took place over 3 days in late September at a private medical facility near downtown Chicago. 537 people came to donate. So they waited in lines that stretched down the hallway. They filled out paperwork. They rolled up their sleeves. Elena Martinez worked all 3 days, barely sleeping, running on coffee and adrenaline. She drew blood from a retired teacher, a construction worker, a lawyer, a grandmother, a college student. Each person had their own reason for coming, but none of them knew the full story. "What's this for?" one donor asked Elena as she prepped his arm. "A child with a rare blood disorder," Elena answered honestly. "We're testing to build a registry of potential donors. Will I know if I'm a match? If you are, we'll contact you. Otherwise, your blood will be used for regular donations. Either way, you're helping." The man nodded, satisfied. "My daughter is 7. If she needed help, I'd hope strangers would care enough to show up." That was the refrain Elena heard over and over during those 3 days. Parents thinking of their own children, people remembering when they, or someone they loved, had needed help. Humans being human in the best possible way. At the end of the 3rd day, Elena compiled the results. Of the 537 donors, 23 had compatible blood types for rare disorders. 23 names went into a registry. 23 potential matches for patients who needed miracles. Among those 23 names was a code, Flight 23. Elena noticed it when she was filing the paperwork. She'd personally drawn blood from every donor, but she didn't remember anyone using a code instead of a name. She checked the registration forms and found only the code, or an address that led to a lawyer's office, and a note, "Contact through intermediary only." "That's odd," Elena mentioned to Linda. Linda glanced at the file. "Anonymous donor. It happens sometimes. People who want to help but value their privacy. As long as the blood is good and the paperwork is complete, it doesn't matter." Elena filed the registry and tried to forget about it. She had no way of knowing that Flight 23 had tested himself 3 times, hoping desperately to be compatible. She had no way of knowing that he'd spent 6 weeks making phone calls, organizing logistics, funding everything from his own pocket. She had no way of knowing that Flight 23 was Michael Jordan. But Michael knew the results. Denise called him the day after the blood drive ended. 23 potential matches, she reported. The registry is complete, and the hospital has everything they need. But I'm still not compatible, Michael asked, though he already knew the answer. No, your blood type didn't change. You're not a match. Michael sat with this disappointment for a moment. He'd hoped that somehow, miraculously, he could be the direct answer to Sarah's need. But medicine didn't work on hope. Okay, he said finally. So we did what we could. Now it's up to the doctors. You organized a blood drive that found 23 potential donors for rare blood types. That's not nothing, Michael. It's not enough if Sarah dies. You did everything possible. We'll see. Michael hung up, feeling the weight of helplessness. It was a feeling he hated more than losing championships. On the court, he could control outcomes through skill and will. But in this situation, he was powerless. All he could do was wait. Sarah's condition worsened through October. The doctors tried to match her with donors from the registry, but the process was slow and complicated. Blood compatibility involved more than just matching types. There were antibodies, proteins, factors that could cause rejection. On October 15th, Dr. Patel sat down with Margaret Chen in his office. His face was grave. Sarah needs a transfusion immediately, he said. We've tested every donor in the registry. Most aren't compatible when we dig deeper into the subtyping. But we have 3 possible matches. We're doing final compatibility screening now. When will you know? Margaret's voice shook. Tomorrow. Maybe the day after. But Margaret, Sarah doesn't have much time. Her body is starting to shut down. The transfusion needs to happen within 48 hours. Or... He didn't finish the sentence. Margaret covered her face with her hands. After 2 years of fighting, 2 years of hoping, were they going to lose? Would Sarah die in a hospital bed, surrounded by Michael Jordan posters, believing that heroes were real, but just not real enough to save her? That night, Margaret knelt beside Sarah's hospital bed and prayed harder than she'd ever prayed in her life. Please, God, please. She's 8 years old. She hasn't lived yet. Please. Sarah slept fitfully, her small body failing, her skin pale as paper. In another part of Chicago, Michael Jordan couldn't sleep either. He lay awake thinking about Sarah's letter, about her purple crayon drawing, about the faith she'd placed in him. He'd organized the blood drive. He'd done everything he could. But what if it wasn't enough? At 11:47 p.m. on October 16th, Michael's phone rang. It was Denise. Michael, I just heard from the hospital. They've completed the final compatibility testing on the donors from the registry. And? There was a long pause. Michael's heart pounded. None of them are matches. The antibody screening ruled them all out. The words hit Michael like a physical blow. None. I'm sorry. The doctors are looking at other options, but Sarah is running out of time. They're giving her less than 24 hours. After Denise hung up, Michael sat in his dark bedroom, feeling utterly defeated. He'd failed. Despite all his resources, all his fame, all his determination, he couldn't save one little girl who'd believed in him. He got out of bed and walked to his home office. He opened the drawer where he'd kept Sarah's letter, and he read it again by lamplight, her words blurring as his eyes filled with tears he refused to let fall. Can you help me find people who won't give up on me either? Michael had tried. God, he'd tried. But trying wasn't enough. He picked up the phone and called his private physician, Dr. Robert Chen. No relation to Sarah, just coincidentally the same last name. "Robert, it's Michael. Wake up. I need you to test my blood again. Tonight." "Michael, we already tested you 3 times. You're not compatible with—" "Test me again. I changed my diet 3 weeks ago. I've been taking supplements. I read that blood chemistry can affect compatibility factors. Test me again." Dr. Chen sighed. "Michael, the chances of your compatibility changing are—" "I don't care about chances," Michael interrupted, his voice hard. "I care about a little girl who wrote me a letter asking for help. Test my blood again. Tonight. I'll be at your office in 30 minutes. "Michael, please, Robert, please." Something in Michael's voice, the desperation, the raw emotion, made Dr. Chen agree. "Okay, come now. I'll meet you at my lab." Michael drove through the empty Chicago streets at midnight, praying for a miracle he didn't quite believe in. But what else was there to do? Give up? Accept defeat? Walk away knowing he could have done more? No. Michael Jordan had never accepted defeat in his life. He wasn't starting now. At 1:15 a.m. on October 17th, Dr. Chen drew Michael's blood for the 4th time. At 2:30 a.m., he ran the compatibility tests, checking and rechecking his results. At 2:35 a.m., he called Michael, who was sitting in the waiting room, exhausted and hollow. Michael?" Dr. Chen said, his voice strange. "I don't know how, but you're compatible now. Something in your blood chemistry changed. It's rare, incredibly rare, but it happens. You can donate for Sarah Chen." Michael stood up slowly, not quite believing what he was hearing. "You're certain?" "I ran it 3 times. You're compatible. Your blood can save her life." Michael closed his eyes, and for the first time in years, he felt tears slip down his face. "Call the hospital. Tell them Flight 23 is coming to donate. Tell them I'll be there in 15 minutes. He hung up and walked out into the October night, heading toward Chicago Memorial Hospital, toward Elena Martinez, toward the moment that would change everything. Elena Martinez rubbed her tired eyes and glanced at the clock on the wall of the blood donation center. 2:47 a.m. She should have gone home hours ago, but when the emergency call came in at 11 p.m., she'd volunteered to stay. A donor from the registry was coming tonight. Someone compatible with the urgent case. The mysterious patient who'd prompted the entire private blood drive. After 3 days of testing 500 people, after weeks of complicated compatibility screening, they'd finally found a match. The donor was coming now in the middle of the night because the patient couldn't wait until morning. Elena had sent everyone else home. The donation didn't require a full staff, just one nurse who knew what she was doing. James Rodriguez, the night security guard, was somewhere in the building on his rounds. Otherwise, the hospital's blood center was empty, quiet except for the hum of refrigeration units storing donated blood. She'd prepped the donation station, laying out needles, tubes, antiseptic, bandages. Everything was ready. All she needed was the donor. Elena heard the sound of a car pulling up outside. She walked to the window and saw a black sedan idling near the entrance. The driver stayed in the car, but a tall figure emerged from the back seat. Even from a distance, even in the dark, Elena recognized the way he moved. Fluid, athletic, unmistakable. Her breath caught. No, it couldn't be. The figure walked toward the entrance, wearing a Bulls baseball cap pulled low, sunglasses despite the darkness, and a plain jacket with the collar turned up. He was trying to be invisible, but some people couldn't hide no matter what they wore. The door opened. Michael Jordan stepped into the blood donation center. Elena stood frozen, her mind racing. I'm Michael Jordan, here, at 2:47 in the morning, to donate blood. He looked directly at her and put a finger to his lips in a gesture of silence. Then he spoke quietly, his voice hoarse. I'm just donor flight 23 tonight, here for Sarah Chen. Elena found her voice. Mr. Jordan, I don't understand. The registry says you're not a compatible match. We tested you weeks ago under a different code. I know. Michael pulled off his sunglasses, and Elena saw exhaustion in his eyes. But 3 days ago, they retested me after I changed my diet and medication. Turns out I'm compatible now. My blood can help her. Elena's hands trembled slightly as she pulled up the file on her computer. She verified the records, checked the codes, matched the compatibility screening. It was true. Somehow, impossibly. Michael Jordan's blood chemistry had shifted just enough to make him compatible with Sarah Chen's rare blood type. How did you... Elena trailed off, shaking her head in disbelief. Does it matter? Michael asked, moving toward the donation chair. She needs blood. I have blood. Let's do this. Elena snapped into professional mode, years of nursing training overriding her shock. Sit here. I need to check your vital signs first, verify your identity against the registry, confirm you're healthy enough to donate. Michael sat in the donation chair, rolling up his sleeve. Elena noticed his hands were shaking slightly. From cold? From nerves? She didn't know. She checked his blood pressure, his pulse, his temperature. Everything was slightly elevated, but within acceptable ranges for donation. Are you feeling all right? She asked, wrapping the blood pressure cuff back in its holder. I'm fine. You seem... I said I'm fine. Michael's voice was sharp. Then he softened it. Sorry. I'm just tired. It's been a long night. Elena nodded, accepting this. She began prepping his arm, swabbing the inside of his elbow with antiseptic. As she worked, the silence felt heavy between them. She had so many questions, but she didn't know where to start. How do you know Sarah Chen? Elena asked quietly as she positioned the needle. Michael stared at the ceiling. I don't. Never met her. Then why? She wrote me a letter. Michael's voice was soft now, almost vulnerable. 3 months ago, she asked me to help find donors, so I did. Elena paused, the needle hovering over Michael's vein. The blood drive, the private foundation. That was you. That was a lot of people who cared about helping. I just made some phone calls. You organized a drive that tested over 500 people. We needed to find compatible donors. But you weren't compatible then. No, Michael agreed. I wasn't. Elena inserted the needle smoothly, and blood began flowing through the tube into the collection bag. Michael didn't flinch, didn't look away. He just stared at the ceiling, lost in thought. So, what happened? Elena asked, monitoring the flow rate. How did you become compatible? Michael was quiet for a long moment. I talked to doctors, researchers. I asked if there was any way blood compatibility could change. They said it was rare but possible. Sometimes diet, medication, even stress levels can affect blood chemistry and antibody presence. So I tried everything. I changed what I ate, took supplements, got tested every few days. That's incredible dedication for someone you've never met. Is it? Michael's eyes finally moved from the ceiling to meet Elena's gaze. When my mother was sick years ago, a stranger donated blood that saved her life. I never knew who it was, never got to thank them, but I never forgot what they gave us. They gave me my mother. If I can do that for someone else's family, why wouldn't I? Elena felt tears prick her eyes. She blinked them away, staying professional. The media would love this story. Do you know how much good publicity? No. Michael's voice was firm. No media. No publicity. No story. But why? You could inspire thousands of people to donate blood. You could… Elena, that's your name, right? Michael waited for her nod. If this becomes public, Sarah's story becomes about me. She becomes the girl Michael Jordan saved. Every article, every interview, every time someone talks about her recovery, my name will be attached to it. That's not fair to her. I don't understand. Michael shifted slightly in the chair, careful not to disturb the needle. Sarah wrote to me asking for help finding donors, not asking me to save her, not asking to meet me, just asking if I could help get people to care. She wanted to believe that strangers would help because people are good, not because Michael Jordan asked them to. He paused, gathering his thoughts. If I go public with this, I take that away from her. I make her survival about my generosity instead of her strength. I make it about celebrity instead of humanity. That's not what she needs. Elena continued monitoring the donation, but her mind was reeling. So you'll just walk away? Never tell her? Never let her know you read her letter? She doesn't need to know it was me, specifically. She needs to know that people cared, that strangers showed up, that the world has goodness in it, beyond what famous people do for cameras. The blood bag was filling steadily. Elena checked the amount, calculating how much more time they needed. You're shivering, she noticed suddenly. Are you cold? I'm fine. But he wasn't fine. Elena had drawn blood from thousands of people. She knew the signs of someone pushing through discomfort. She stepped closer and placed her hand on Michael's forehead. It was burning. You have a fever, she said sharply. A high fever. You're sick. I know. Then you shouldn't be donating blood. This isn't safe. You could collapse. Your immune system is already… How much longer? Michael interrupted, nodding toward the blood bag. 5 more minutes. But, Mr. Jordan… Then we're doing this. I cleared it with my physician. I'm medically eligible despite the fever. This was my only window before Sarah needs the transfusion. She doesn't have time for me to get better first. Elena stared at him, understanding dawning. You have the flu. Since Monday. 3 days now. And you're here, in the middle of the night, donating blood while fighting an illness that could knock out a normal person for a week. I'm here doing what needs to be done. You're risking your health. Your basketball season starts in 3 weeks. Michael's jaw tightened. Sarah's life is worth more than basketball. Elena had no response to that. She watched the blood bag fill. He watched Michael's face grow paler, watched him clench his fists against the armrest as his body fought both fever and the effects of blood loss. Almost done, she said softly. Tell me about her, Michael said suddenly. Sarah, what's she like? Elena hesitated. I've never met her. This patient information has been kept confidential. All I know is what's in the medical files. Tell me what you know. Elena pulled up the limited information she had access to. She's 8 years old. She's been fighting this blood disorder for 3 years. She lost her parents in a car accident 2 years ago. She lives with her grandmother. Elena paused. She's a Bulls fan. Her hospital room is apparently covered in your posters. Michael closed his eyes. She told me that in her letter. She said watching me play helps her feel strong. Then why not tell her? Why not visit her? It would mean everything to her. Because then this becomes about me being her hero. I don't want to be her hero, Elena. I want her to be her own hero. I want her to survive this and grow up knowing she had the strength to fight. That people helped because she was worth helping, not because she wrote the right letter to the right famous person. The timer beeped. The donation was complete. Elena carefully removed the needle, pressed gauze against Michael's arm, and taped it securely. Keep pressure on that for 5 minutes, then keep the bandage on for at least 6 hours. Michael stood up slowly, swaying slightly. Elena grabbed his arm to steady him. "You need to sit back down," she insisted. "You're dizzy. Here, we need to monitor you for at least 15 minutes after donation." "I'm fine." "You're not fine. You just donated blood while fighting the flu. Sit down before you fall down." Michael allowed himself to be guided back to the chair. Elena brought him orange juice and crackers, the standard post-donation snacks. "Drink this. Your blood sugar is probably crashing." He drank obediently, color slowly returning to his face. They sat in silence for several minutes, the only sound the hum of medical equipment and the distant footsteps of James, the security guard, somewhere in the building. "Will she make it?" Michael asked finally, his voice barely above a whisper. Elena labeled the blood bag, preparing it for immediate delivery to Sarah's ICU. "I don't know. The doctors will start the transfusion as soon as this arrives. And then we wait to see if her body accepts it. But you've given her a fighting chance. That's more than she had yesterday." Michael nodded, staring at his hands. "That has to be enough then." Elena finished the paperwork, documenting the donation under the codename Flight 23. No real names, no connection to Michael Jordan in the official records. "Elena," Michael said as he prepared to leave, "I need you to promise me something." "What?" "Don't tell anyone I was here. Not your supervisor, not the media, not even Sarah's family. Let them think it was an anonymous donor. Let Sarah believe that strangers cared enough to help because people are good, not because Michael Jordan is famous." "That's asking a lot. This is incredible. People should know." "Promise me," Michael interrupted, his voice intense. "If you tell this story now, you change what it means. You make it about celebrity charity instead of human compassion. Sarah needs to believe in people, not in me." Elena struggled with this. Every instinct told her the world needed to hear this story, needed to see this side of Michael Jordan. But looking into his eyes, seeing the genuine care there, the wisdom behind his request, she understood. This wasn't about him. It never had been. "Okay," Elena said finally. "I promise. But someday," Michael agreed. "If she makes it, you can tell her story. But only when the time is right. Only when people are ready to understand why I asked for silence." He stood again, steadier now. He pulled his baseball cap low, put his sunglasses back on despite it being the middle of the night. "Thank you, Elena, for understanding, for keeping this between us. Thank you for caring enough to do this." Michael walked toward the door, then paused. "When you hear whether she survives, will you let me know? Through my assistant, Denise Freeman. I need to know." "I will." Michael Jordan left the blood donation center at 3:42 a.m., walking out into the October darkness. Elena watched through the window as he got into the black sedan. The car pulled away, disappearing into the empty Chicago streets. Elena stood alone in the quiet center, holding the blood bag that might save Sarah Chen's life. She looked at the label, Flight 23, anonymous donor. No story, no credit. Just blood given in the night by someone who cared. She walked to the internal hospital transport system and prepared the blood for immediate delivery to Sarah's ICU. As she sealed the transport bag, she noticed her hands were shaking. She'd just witnessed something extraordinary. Not Michael Jordan, the basketball player, not Michael Jordan, the celebrity, but Michael Jordan, the human being, giving part of himself to save a child he'd never met, asking for nothing in return except silence. Elena returned to her desk and opened her journal, a leather-bound book where she sometimes documented significant moments from her nursing career. She'd never written about a single donation before, but this was different. At the top of a blank page, she wrote, October 17th, 1995, 2:47 a.m. Then she documented everything: Michael's arrival, their conversation, his fever, his reasoning, his request for silence. Every detail she could remember. She wrote because she knew, somehow, that this story mattered. Not today, maybe not for years, but someday. This story would need to be told. Someday, people would need to understand what real greatness looked like. When she finished writing, Elena locked the journal in her locker. Then she went to find James Rodriguez, the security guard. James, did you see anyone unusual tonight? James shrugged. Just you working late. Why? No reason. Just checking. She went home as the sun rose over Chicago, carrying a secret that weighed more than she'd expected. In the ICU, doctors were beginning Sarah Chen's transfusion, blood from an anonymous donor flowing into her small body. And somewhere in Chicago, Michael Jordan was finally sleeping, fever-ridden and exhausted, having given everything he could to help a little girl who believed in heroes. Neither Sarah nor her grandmother would ever know his name appeared anywhere in their miracle. And that, but Michael believed, was exactly how it should be. Dr. Raj Patel stood at the nurses' station on the ICU floor at 6 a.m., holding the blood bag that had arrived from the donation center an hour earlier. He'd verified the compatibility 3 times, checked every protocol, confirmed every detail. The blood was perfect. Against all odds, they'd found a match. He walked toward Sarah Chen's room, where Margaret sat in the same chair she'd occupied for 3 days straight. She hadn't gone home, hadn't changed clothes, had barely eaten. She just sat there, holding her granddaughter's hand, praying. Mrs. Chen, Dr. Patel said softly, not wanting to startle her. Margaret looked up, her eyes red-rimmed and exhausted. Is it time? We have the blood. A compatible donor came through last night. We're ready to begin the transfusion. Margaret's hand flew to her mouth. Oh, thank God! Thank God! Tears streamed down her face. Can I thank the donor? Can I know who? It was anonymous, Dr. Patel said gently. All I know is that they were part of the registry from that private blood drive in September. They chose not to identify themselves. Margaret looked down at Sarah, who lay pale and still in the hospital bed, barely conscious. I want to thank them. I need them to know. I'm sure they know, Dr. Patel interrupted. People who donate anonymously usually do it because helping is enough for them. They don't need thanks. He began preparing the IV line, checking Sarah's vital signs, making final adjustments. The transfusion would take several hours, and then they'd wait. Sarah's body would either accept the blood or reject it, and there was nothing to do but hope. Is she going to make it? Margaret whispered. Dr. Patel chose his words carefully. The next 12 hours are critical. We're giving her the best chance possible. But Mrs. Chen, Sarah is very weak. Even with compatible blood, her body has been through so much. We have to wait and see how she responds. Margaret nodded, understanding what he wasn't saying. Sarah might still die, At 6:15 a.m., Dr. Patel started the transfusion. Blood from Flight 23, from Michael Jordan, began flowing into Sarah Chen's small body. Margaret held Sarah's other hand, whispering prayers in Chinese and English, begging God for a miracle. Sarah's eyes fluttered open briefly. "Grammy? I'm here, baby. I'm right here. Am I going to be okay?" Margaret's voice broke. "Yes, sweetheart. Yes, you are. A very kind person gave you special blood to help you get better. Like a superhero?" "Like a superhero," Margaret agreed, squeezing Sarah's hand gently. Sarah smiled weakly and closed her eyes again. Across the hospital, Elena Martinez couldn't bring herself to leave. She'd gone home, showered, changed clothes, and then returned to the hospital even though her shift didn't start until that evening. She sat in the cafeteria, drinking terrible coffee, unable to think about anything except Sarah Chen and Michael Jordan. She checked her watch every few minutes. The transfusion would have started by now. Sarah's body was receiving blood that Michael had given while fighting the flu. Blood he'd worked for months to make compatible. Blood he'd donated in secret at 2:47 in the morning. Would it be enough? And Elena had seen transfusions succeed and fail. She'd witnessed medical miracles and devastating losses. She knew that good intentions and compatible blood didn't guarantee survival. Sarah's body had been failing for so long. Would it have the strength to accept this gift? At noon, Elena couldn't wait anymore. She went to the ICU floor and found one of the nurses she knew, Patricia. "The Chen girl," Elena asked quietly. "The one who received the transfusion this morning. How is she?" Patricia checked her tablet. "Still critical. The transfusion is complete, but now we're monitoring for rejection. Her vital signs are stable, but barely. It could go either way." Elena returned to the cafeteria and waited. She thought about calling Denise Freeman, Michael's assistant, to let her know the transfusion had happened. But what would she say? "Sir, the blood has been given. Now we wait to see if an 8-year-old girl lives or dies." She decided to wait until there was real news to share. In Sarah's room, Margaret watched monitors she didn't understand, tracking numbers that meant life or death. Nurses came and went, checking vitals, adjusting medications, speaking in hushed tones. Dr. Patel stopped by every hour. "Any change?" Margaret asked each time. "We're watching closely," he'd reply, which wasn't really an answer. At 2 p.m., 8 hours after the transfusion began, something shifted. Sarah's blood pressure, which had been dangerously low for days, ticked upward. Just slightly. Just enough to notice. Dr. Patel studied the monitors, not wanting to hope too soon. At 4 p.m., Sarah's oxygen saturation improved. Her breathing became less labored. At 6 p.m., her temperature normalized for the first time in a week. Dr. Patel allowed himself a small smile. Her body is accepting the blood. Margaret collapsed in her chair, sobbing with relief. "She's going to make it?" "It's still early," Dr. Patel cautioned, "but these are very good signs. Very good." At 8 p.m., Sarah opened her eyes. Really opened them, with awareness and presence that had been absent for days. "Grammy?" Her voice was weak but clear. Margaret leaned over the bed, tears streaming down her face. "I'm here, baby. I'm right here. I'm thirsty." Such a simple request. Such a beautiful, normal, living request. "I'll get you water," Margaret said, her voice shaking. "I'll get you anything you want." Sarah drank slowly, swallowing carefully. She looked around the room as if seeing it for the first time in days. "How long have I been asleep?" "A while, sweetheart. But you're awake now. You're getting better." Because of the superhero blood? Margaret laughed through her tears. Yes, because of the superhero blood. By midnight, Dr. Patel felt confident enough to tell Margaret what she'd been waiting to hear. She's going to make it. Sarah is going to survive. Margaret wept, praising God, thanking doctors and nurses, overwhelmed by gratitude that had nowhere to land because the person she most wanted to thank was anonymous. Elena heard the news at 7 a.m. the next morning when she arrived for her shift. Patricia grabbed her in the hallway. The Chen girl is going to make it. The transfusion worked. She's stable and improving. Dr. Patel says she'll make a full recovery. Elena leaned against the wall, feeling relief wash over her like a wave. Sarah was alive. Michael's blood had saved her. The impossible had become possible. She went to her locker and pulled out her phone. She called Denise Freeman's number, which Michael had made sure she had. Denise Freeman, the voice answered professionally. Ms. Freeman, this is Elena Martinez from Chicago Memorial Hospital. We spoke about the blood drive. I have news about Sarah Chen. There was a brief pause. Hold on. Elena heard muffled voices, then Denise returned. I'm putting you on speaker. Go ahead. The transfusion worked. Sarah accepted the blood. She's going to survive. She's going to make a complete recovery. The silence on the other end lasted several seconds. Then Elena heard it. A quiet exhale, maybe a sob caught and suppressed. Then Michael's voice, hoarse and thick with emotion. She's okay? She's going to be fine. I'm Mr. Jordan. Your blood saved her life. Another long pause. Thank you for calling. Thank you for taking care of her. Thank you for caring enough to help. The line went dead. Elena stood in the quiet hallway, imagining Michael Jordan somewhere in Chicago, receiving the news that his secret gift had worked. She wondered if he was alone, if he'd allowed himself to cry, if he'd felt the weight lift that he must have been carrying for months. She returned to work, but throughout the day, she found reasons to walk past the ICU. She wanted to see Sarah Chen with her own eyes, wanted to witness the miracle that Michael Jordan had made possible. That afternoon, during her break, Elena finally allowed herself to go to Sarah's room. She stood in the doorway, not entering, just watching. Sarah was sitting up in bed, still pale and weak, all but unmistakably alive. She was eating Jell-O, green Jell-O, while her grandmother sat beside her, one hand resting on Sarah's leg as if afraid to let go. The walls of the room were indeed covered with Michael Jordan posters. Number 23, dunking, shooting, celebrating championships. Sarah's hero was everywhere, watching over her recovery, never knowing that he'd literally given his blood to save her. Margaret looked up and saw Elena in the doorway. Are you one of Sarah's nurses? Elena shook her head. No, I work in the blood donation center. I just wanted to see how she was doing. She's doing wonderfully, Margaret said, her voice full of joy. Thanks to whoever donated that blood. I wish I could thank them personally. Elena smiled. I'm sure they know you're grateful. Sometimes the best gifts are the ones we give without expecting anything back. But I need them to know they saved my granddaughter's life. They gave me my whole world back. They know, Elena said softly. Trust me, they know. She left before Margaret could ask more questions. As she walked away, she heard Sarah's weak voice asking, Grammy, did Mr. Jordan ever get my letter? Elena paused, listening. I don't know, sweetheart, Margaret replied, but I think he would be very proud of how brave you've been. Elena continued walking, carrying the weight of knowing the truth. Michael Jordan had received the letter. He'd read it 3 times. He'd organized a blood drive for 500 people. He'd tested his blood again and again. He'd come to the hospital at 2:47 in the morning while fighting the flu. And Sarah would never know. That evening, Elena returned to her locker and pulled out her journal. She opened to the entry she'd written the night before and added new information. October 18th, 1995. Sarah Chen survived. The transfusion worked. She's going to live. Michael's blood saved her life. I called to tell him the news. He could barely speak. I think he was crying. I've never heard relief sound like that before. Sarah doesn't know it was him. Her grandmother doesn't know. The world doesn't know. Only me, Michael, his assistant Denise, and his doctor. 4 people carry this secret. Michael was right about one thing. If this story came out now, it would become about him. Sarah would be the girl Michael Jordan saved for the rest of her life. By staying silent, he gave her something more valuable than his blood. He gave her the freedom to be her own hero. I don't know if I'll ever be able to tell this story, but I'm writing it down because someday, someone needs to understand what real greatness looks like. It doesn't always happen on a basketball court in front of cameras. Sometimes it happens at 2:47 a.m. in an empty hospital, with no witnesses, no applause, no recognition. Sometimes greatness is a gift given in complete silence. Elena closed the journal and locked it away. She went home that night feeling she'd witnessed something sacred, something the world wasn't ready to understand yet. In his home, Michael Jordan sat alone in his office, staring at Sarah's letter. He'd received the news hours ago, but he was still processing it. Sarah was alive. She would grow up. She would have a future. He thought about his mother, saved years ago by an anonymous donor's blood. He thought about the circle of giving, how kindness rippled forward through time. Someone had saved his mother. Now he'd saved Sarah. Someday, maybe Sarah would save someone else. That was how the world was supposed to work. Not through fame or celebrity, but through humans helping humans because it was right. Michael carefully folded Sarah's letter and placed it in his wallet. He would carry it with him as a reminder, not of what he'd done, but of what we all could do when we chose compassion over recognition. The 1995-96 NBA season would begin in 3 weeks. Michael would lead the Bulls to a record-breaking 72-10 record and another championship. The world would celebrate his greatness on the court. But he would know the truth. His greatest victory that year had nothing to do with basketball. It happened in the middle of the night, in an empty blood donation center, when he gave part of himself to save a little girl who believed in heroes. And nobody would ever know. That, Michael thought, was exactly as it should be. 3 weeks after the transfusion, Sarah Chen went home. She walked out of Chicago Memorial Hospital holding her grandmother's hand, wearing her Michael Jordan jersey, number 23, and carrying a teddy bear one of the nurses had given her. The November air was cold and crisp. Sarah took a deep breath, filling her lungs with freedom. For the first time in months, the world didn't feel heavy. Her body felt light, almost normal. She was tired, yes, but it was a different kind of tired. Not the exhaustion of dying, but the weariness of healing. "Ready to go home, sweetheart?" Margaret asked, tears of joy in her eyes. "So ready. To Grammy." They drove through Chicago slowly, Sarah staring out the window at everything as if seeing it for the first time. Trees losing their autumn leaves, people walking dogs, children playing in parks, the ordinary magic of life continuing. When they pulled up to their small brick house on Oakdale Avenue, Sarah smiled. "I missed home." Home missed you too. That evening, the local news ran a story about Sarah's recovery. A reporter stood outside the hospital, speaking to the camera. 8-year-old Sarah Chen has beaten incredible odds, surviving a rare blood disorder thanks to an anonymous blood donor. Her story is a reminder of the importance of blood donation and the difference one person can make. The Chen family says they're grateful to everyone who helped, especially the mysterious donor whose identity remains unknown. The segment showed a brief clip of Margaret speaking. "Whoever you are, wherever you are, thank you. You gave me my granddaughter back. You gave her a future. I'll pray for you every day for the rest of my life." Michael Jordan watched the news segment alone in his home office. He saw Sarah's face, still pale but smiling. He saw the grandmother's tears of gratitude. He felt the weight of what he'd done settle into something solid and real. Sarah was alive. That was all that mattered. He turned off the television and returned to preparing for the upcoming season. The Bulls' first game was in 2 days. The world expected greatness from him on the court. That, at least, was a pressure he understood. Sarah's first days home were gentle and slow. She slept late, ate small meals. She spent hours on the couch reading books and watching television. Her body was healing, but it would take time. Dr. Patel had been clear. No school for at least a month. No strenuous activity for 6 months. Regular checkups to monitor her blood levels. "You're going to live a normal life," he'd assured her. "But you have to be patient while your body recovers." Patience was hard for an 8-year-old who'd been sick for so long. Sarah wanted to run, to play, to be a kid again. But she was weak, and weakness frustrated her. "It's not fair," she complained to Margaret one afternoon. "I feel better, but I can't do anything." "You're alive, baby. That's everything. The rest will come." On a quiet Tuesday evening, Sarah sat at the kitchen table with paper and crayons, the same purple crayon she'd used to write her first letter to Michael Jordan. "What are you doing?" Margaret asked, setting down a cup of tea. "Writing another letter to Mr. Jordan." Margaret's heart squeezed. "Oh, sweetheart, you know he probably didn't get your first letter. He's very famous and busy. He gets thousands of—" "I know," Sarah interrupted, "but I want to write it anyway. Even if he doesn't read it, I want to say thank you." "Thank you for what?" Sarah thought carefully, choosing her words the way she'd learned to do when things were important. "Thank you for teaching me not to give up. When I was really sick, I would think about how you never give up in games, even when you're losing. And I would tell myself, if Michael Jordan doesn't quit, and I can't quit either." Margaret wiped her eyes, trying not to cry in front of Sarah. "That's beautiful. What else will you tell him?" Sarah began writing, her hand steadier now than it had been in July. "Dear Mr. Jordan, thank you for the best year. I got to come home from the hospital. I got to see you play again on TV. A stranger saved my life with their blood. Grammy says miracles happen when good people do good things. You are my miracle because you teach me to never give up. Even when things are really hard, I think about you making impossible shots, and I know I can keep going. I'm going to get stronger every day. Someday, I want to play basketball like you. Maybe not as good as you, but I want to try. Thank you for being my hero. Love to, Sarah." She drew another basketball at the bottom, this time adding a small stick figure wearing number 23. "Will you mail it for me, Grammy?" Margaret took the letter, knowing it would likely disappear into the Bulls organization's mailroom, probably never reaching Michael Jordan's eyes. But it didn't matter. The letter wasn't really about getting a response. It was about Sarah expressing gratitude. about her learning that words could carry love across distance. "I'll mail it tomorrow," Margaret promised. She did, sending it through regular channels to the Chicago Bulls office. The letter arrived during the 3rd week of December, in the middle of the Bulls' extraordinary season. They were winning everything, breaking records, making history. Marcus Webb, still working in the mailroom, processed thousands of letters that week. Holiday greetings, fan mail, autograph requests. See, he'd become efficient at sorting, categorizing, responding with form letters and photocopied signatures. But when he opened Sarah Chen's second letter, recognition hit him like a punch to the chest. He remembered her name from the first letter he'd delivered to Denise Freeman 5 months ago. The little girl with the rare blood disorder who'd written asking for help. She was alive. She'd survived. Marcus read her words about strangers and miracles, and not giving up. He read her gratitude, her hope, her dreams of playing basketball someday. His eyes filled with tears. He didn't know what had happened after he'd delivered her first letter. He didn't know if Michael Jordan had ever seen it or done anything about it. But Sarah was alive, and that was a miracle worth celebrating regardless of the how or why. But Marcus made a copy of the letter for himself, something he never did, something that was probably against protocol, and then he walked upstairs to Denise Freeman's office for the second time in his career. "Ms. Freeman," he said, knocking on her open door. "I have another letter from Sarah Chen." Denise looked up sharply. "The little girl from the summer?" "She's alive. She survived. She wrote another letter to Mr. Jordan. I thought he might want to see it." Denise took the letter, reading it quickly. Her composure cracked. "Oh my God, she made it!" "You knew about her case?" Denise caught herself, remembering Michael's insistence on privacy. I was aware of the situation. Thank you for bringing this to me, Marcus. I'll make sure Mr. Jordan sees it." After Marcus left, Denise sat alone with Sarah's letter, crying quietly at her desk. And she'd known the transfusion had worked. Michael had told her weeks ago, but seeing Sarah's handwriting, seeing her hope and gratitude made it real in a different way. She called Michael immediately. "There's another letter from Sarah Chen. You need to see this. Can you read it to me? I'm in the car heading to practice." Denise read Sarah's words slowly, her voice breaking on certain phrases. When she finished, there was a long silence on the line. "Michael? Are you there?" "I'm here." His voice was thick. "She sounds good, strong." "She is. She's alive and hopeful and planning a future. You did that." "No," Michael corrected firmly. "Sarah did that. She had the strength to survive. I just gave her blood. She gave herself the will to live." "You're impossible. You know that?" "I prefer to think of myself as consistent." "What are you going to do with the letter?" "What do you want me to do with it?" Michael thought for a moment. "Send the usual response. A form letter thanking her for being a fan. A photocopied signature. Let her think her letter was one of thousands. Don't make this about me visiting her or acknowledging what happened. She doesn't need that burden." "Michael, she's 8 years old, Denise. She should get to be a kid, not the girl Michael Jordan saved. Send the form letter." "What if she wants more? What if she wants to meet you?" "If she really needs to meet me, we'll arrange something through the Make-A-Wish Foundation or something similar. But only if she asks, and only through proper channels where it's about granting a fan's wish, not about me being her donor. And the two things stay separate. You're drawing very fine lines here. Those fine lines matter. They're the difference between Sarah being grateful to a stranger who donated blood and Sarah feeling obligated to Michael Jordan for the rest of her life. I don't want her gratitude. I want her freedom." Denise sighed. I'll send the form letter. Thank you. And Denise, keep that letter. Somewhere safe. Someday, maybe it'll matter. But not today. The form letter arrived at Sarah's house 3 days before Christmas. It was professionally printed on Bull's letterhead. Dear Sarah, thank you for your letter and for being such a dedicated Bulls fan. Your support means everything to the team. We're glad to hear you're feeling better and wish you continued health and happiness. Keep believing in yourself and never give up on your dreams. Our best wishes, the Chicago Bulls organization. At the bottom was a photocopied signature. Michael Jordan. Sarah held the letter carefully, tracing the signature with her finger. He wrote back, Grammy, look. Margaret looked at the obviously mass-produced letter and didn't have the heart to tell Sarah it wasn't personal. That's wonderful, sweetheart. Do you think he really read my letter? Margaret chose her words carefully. I think that whether he read it or not, you're a Bulls fan, and he appreciates that. That's what matters, right? Sarah nodded, satisfied with this answer. She folded the letter and placed it in a small box with the first letter she'd written, the one that had started everything. That Christmas, Sarah was strong enough to go to church with Margaret. They sat in the back pew, Margaret's arm around Sarah's thin shoulders, both of them grateful for the gift of another Christmas together. Reverend Thompson mentioned during his sermon the importance of anonymous giving, of kindness done without expectation of recognition. The greatest gifts, he said, are often the ones nobody sees. When we help others without need for credit, we honor the true spirit of giving. Margaret squeezed Sarah's hand, thinking about the anonymous donor who'd saved her granddaughter's life. Somewhere in Chicago, someone had given blood that had made this moment possible. Someone had cared about a little girl they'd never met. Thank you, Margaret whispered, not sure if she was praying or just speaking to the universe. Whoever you are, thank you. Across the city, Michael Jordan spent Christmas morning with his own family. He opened presents, laughed with his children, felt the warmth of normalcy that fame often denied him. But in a quiet moment, alone in his study, he took out his wallet and removed Sarah's first letter, the one written in purple crayon asking for help. He'd carried it with him for 5 months now. It had been with him during every game, every practice, every moment of the Bulls' record-breaking season. He unfolded it carefully and read it again, as he'd done dozens of times. Merry Christmas, Sarah, he whispered. Keep fighting, keep believing, keep being you. He refolded the letter and placed it back in his wallet, right next to a photo of his own mother, the woman saved years ago by another anonymous donor. The circle of giving continued, invisible and unbroken. As winter turned to spring, Sarah grew stronger. By February, she was back in school part-time. By March, she was attending full days. By April, Dr. Patel cleared her for light physical activity. In May, Sarah's third-grade class had a basketball unit in gym. The teacher, Mr. Patterson, taught them basic dribbling and shooting. Sarah was clumsy at first, her body still remembering sickness more than strength. But she kept trying, kept practicing, kept pushing. You're pretty good at this, Mr. Patterson observed one day. You a Bulls fan? Sarah's face lit up. The biggest fan. Michael Jordan is my hero. Well, you've got his determination. Keep working at it. You might surprise yourself. That afternoon, Sarah came home and told Margaret, I made 3 baskets today. 3! Mr. Patterson said I'm getting good. Margaret pulled Sarah into a hug. I'm so proud of you, sweetheart. Grammy, do you think I could really play basketball someday? Like, on a team? Margaret thought about everything Sarah had survived. The illness, the treatments, the brush with death. the impossible recovery. If Sarah could beat all that, what was a basketball team? I think you can do anything you set your mind to. If you want to play basketball, we'll find a way. Sarah beamed. I'm going to practice every day. I'm going to get so good that maybe someday I'll play in a game, and Mr. Jordan will see me and know that I never gave up. Margaret's heart broke and soared at the same time. Sarah had no idea how much Michael Jordan already knew about her strength, her courage, her refusal to surrender. But maybe that was the point. Maybe not knowing was the gift that allowed Sarah to claim her own victory, to write her own story, to be her own hero. And the 1995-96 NBA season ended with the Bulls winning their fourth championship. Michael Jordan was named Finals MVP. The world celebrated his greatness, his dominance, his legend. In her small house in Lakeview, Sarah watched every game, cheering wildly, wearing her number 23 jersey, dreaming of the day she'd be strong enough to play for real. She had no idea that Michael Jordan carried her letter in his wallet. She had no idea that he thought of her every time he won a game. She had no idea that part of him, literally part of his blood, flowed through her veins. And Michael wanted it to stay that way, because Sarah Chen deserved to grow up believing she'd survived because of her own strength, supported by the kindness of strangers who cared about a little girl they'd never met. That was the story she needed to carry into her future. And that was the gift worth more than any championship ring. That was greatness in its truest form. Giving everything, expecting nothing, and letting someone else be the hero of their own life. 1998, 3 years later. Sarah Chen, now 11 years old, stood at the free throw line in her middle school gymnasium. Her teammates watched from the bench. The score was tied, 15 seconds left in the game. Everything depended on these two shots. Sarah bounced the ball 3 times, just like she'd seen Michael Jordan do 1,000 times on television. She took a deep breath, bent her knees, and released. Swish. The crowd erupted. 1 point up with 10 seconds left. She received the ball again for her second free throw. Her hands were shaking now, adrenaline coursing through her body, a body that had been strong and healthy for 3 years. And the doctors called her recovery miraculous. Margaret called it a blessing. Sarah just called it her second chance. She shot again. Swish. Her team won 34-32. Sarah's teammates mobbed her, celebrating like they'd won a championship. It was just a middle school game, just one small victory in a gymnasium where maybe 30 people watched. But to Sarah, it felt like everything. After the game, Margaret waited in the parking lot, tears in her eyes. "You were amazing, sweetheart. Did you see both free throws? I made both. I saw everything. Your parents would be so proud." Sarah's smile faltered for just a moment. She was 8 when her parents died, 11 now. The memories were fading, becoming more like photographs than lived experiences. But she knew they would have loved watching her play. I wish they could see me," Sarah said quietly. "They can," Margaret assured her. "Somewhere they're watching, and they're cheering louder than anyone." That night, Sarah lay in bed staring at her Michael Jordan posters. She still had them all, even though some of her friends thought she was too old for posters now. But Michael Jordan wasn't just a poster to her. He was proof that you could overcome anything if you refused to quit. She'd never forgotten being sick, though the memories had dulled. She remembered the hospital, the exhaustion, the fear in her grandmother's eyes. She remembered writing a letter to Michael Jordan asking for help. She remembered the anonymous donor whose blood had saved her life. Sometimes she wondered about that person. Were they a man or woman? young or old? Did they know they'd saved her life? And did they ever think about her? "Thank you," Sarah whispered into the darkness, as she did every night. "Whoever you are, thank you." Across Chicago, Elena Martinez sat in her apartment, now promoted to head of the Blood Donation Center at Chicago Memorial Hospital. She still had her journal, still had the entry from October 17, 1995. She'd added to it occasionally over the years, noting when Sarah returned to school, when she started playing basketball, when she thrived. Elena had kept her promise to Michael Jordan. She told no one about that night. The secret lived only in her journal and in the memories of 4 people: herself, Michael, Denise Freeman, and Michael's private physician. Sometimes Elena wondered if she should tell. The world deserved to know what Michael Jordan had done. But then she'd remember his words. Sarah's story becomes about me. She becomes the girl Michael Jordan saved. Looking at Sarah's recovery, at her normal, beautiful life, Elena understood that Michael had been right. Sarah was just Sarah, a kid who'd survived something terrible and was now living freely, without the burden of being anyone's story except her own. 2003, 8 years later. Sarah Chen walked across the stage at her high school graduation. She'd been accepted to Northwestern University, planning to major in biology. Her dream was to become a doctor, specifically a hematologist, a blood specialist. "I want to help people like me," she'd explained to Margaret when filling out college applications. "People with blood disorders who need someone to understand what they're going through." Margaret, now 73 and moving slower but still sharp as ever, sat in the audience, crying tears of pure joy. Sarah had not only survived, she had thrived. Honor student, varsity basketball player, volunteer at the local hospital's blood drive center. Sarah still wore number 23 on the basketball court. Still watched Bulls games, though Michael Jordan had retired now. Still believed in heroes, though she understood they were human. After graduation, Sarah stood in the parking lot with her best friend Maya taking photos. A reporter from the local paper approached. "I'm doing a story on notable graduates. Can I ask you a few questions?" Sarah shrugged. "Sure. I see from the program you're going to Northwestern for biology. What sparked that interest?" Sarah thought about how to answer. She could tell the sanitized version, or she could tell the truth. She chose truth. "When I was 8, I almost died from a rare blood disorder. An anonymous blood donor saved my life. I want to become a doctor so I can help other people the way that stranger helped me." The reporter scribbled notes. "That's quite a story. Do you know anything about the donor?" "No. They chose to remain anonymous. But I think about them all the time. They gave me everything, my whole life, and they asked for nothing back. That must be frustrating, not being able to thank them." Sarah smiled. "At first, yes, but now I understand. The best way to thank them is to live well, to help others, to pass forward the gift they gave me. That's what I plan to do." The article ran the following week with a photo of Sarah in her graduation gown and basketball jersey. And the headline read, "From Hospital Bed to Honor Student, Sarah Chen's Journey of Gratitude." Marcus Webb, still working at the Bulls organization, now in community relations instead of the mailroom, saw the article in the break room. He recognized Sarah's name immediately. He'd never forgotten the 2 letters she'd sent, never stopped wondering if he'd played a small role in her survival. He clipped the article and put it in his desk drawer, next to the copy of Sarah's second letter he'd kept for 8 years. He didn't know the full story of what had happened after he'd delivered her first letter to Denise Freeman, but he knew Sarah had survived. That was enough. 2006, 11 years later. Sarah Chen started medical school at Northwestern. The coursework was brutal, the hours were endless, but she loved every minute. See, when other students complained about the workload, Sarah thought about lying in a hospital bed at 8 years old, wondering if she'd live to see 9. Medical school was hard. Dying was harder. During her first-year anatomy class, they studied blood, types, components, disorders, treatments. Sarah sat in the lecture hall, fascinated, taking notes faster than the professor could speak. Blood donation saves approximately 4.5 million lives per year in the United States alone, the professor said. It's one of the simplest and most effective ways to help others. Yet we constantly face shortages, particularly for rare blood types. Sarah raised her hand. What about the Bombay blood group? How rare is it really? The professor's eyebrows rose. Extremely rare. 1 in 10,000 people of Indian descent, even rarer in other populations. And it's one of the most difficult types to match. Why do you ask? That's my blood type. It's what almost killed me when I was 8. The classroom went quiet. The professor studied Sarah with new interest. You survived a Bombay blood crisis? An anonymous donor saved my life. Then you're quite fortunate. Finding compatible donors for Bombay blood emergencies is incredibly difficult. You beat serious odds. After class, several students approached Sarah, asking about her experience. She told them the story, not for attention, but because people needed to understand how important blood donation was. I organize blood drives now, she explained. Monthly, at different locations around Chicago. If anyone wants to help, let me know. By the end of her first year, Sarah had organized 6 blood drives, registering over 800 new donors. She didn't do it for credit or recognition. She did it because someone had once cared enough to save her life, and she would spend her life returning that favor to others. 2010. 15 years later, Dr. Sarah Chen completed her residency in pediatric oncology. At 23 years old, she'd become the person she'd dreamed of being. A doctor who helped children with blood disorders, someone who understood their fear because she'd lived it. She accepted a position at Chicago Memorial Hospital, the same hospital where she'd received her life-saving transfusion 15 years earlier. Walking through the doors as a doctor instead of a patient felt surreal. Elena Martinez, now head of the entire blood services department, was in a staff meeting when Sarah's name appeared on the new doctors list. Elena's heart stopped. Sarah Chen, on the little girl from that October night in 1995. She was here, as a doctor. Elena wanted to approach her, to tell her everything, to reveal the secret she'd carried for 15 years. But she remembered Michael's words, remembered her promise. Not yet. Not when the time isn't right. So Elena watched from a distance as Dr. Sarah Chen began her career, treating children with the same blood disorders that had nearly killed her. Elena saw Sarah's compassion, her dedication, her understanding that went deeper than textbooks could teach. Michael Jordan had been right to stay anonymous. Sarah had grown into exactly who she needed to be. Not the girl Michael Jordan saved, but Dr. Sarah Chen, healer, fighter, living proof that strangers could change the world through simple acts of kindness. On 2012, 17 years later, Margaret Chen died peacefully in her sleep at age 81. Sarah held her hand as she took her last breath, whispering prayers in Chinese and English, just as Margaret had done for her so many years ago in a hospital room. At Margaret's funeral, Sarah spoke about her grandmother's faith, her strength, her unwavering belief in miracles, and the goodness of strangers. My grandmother never found out who donated blood to save my life, Sarah said, her voice breaking. She spent years trying to track them down, writing letters to the hospital, to blood banks, to anyone who might know. She wanted to thank them, to tell them they'd given her everything. Sarah paused, composing herself. She died without knowing their name, but she lived knowing that goodness exists in the world, that people help each other not for credit, but because it's right. That belief defined her life and shaped mine. Grammy, wherever you are, I hope you know that the stranger who saved me had the same kind heart you had. That's how you raised me to be, and that's how I'll live, helping others the way you and that anonymous donor helped me. 200 people attended Margaret's funeral. Not one of them knew that Michael Jordan had given Sarah the blood that had allowed Margaret these extra 17 years with her granddaughter. Michael, now 49 and long retired from basketball, read about Margaret's death in the paper. He sat alone in his office, thinking about the grandmother who'd prayed so hard for her granddaughter's survival, who'd believed in miracles, who'd never known that her prayers had been answered by a stranger in the middle of the night. He pulled out his wallet, a different wallet than he'd carried in 1995, but Sarah's letter had been transferred to each new one. The purple crayon had faded, the paper was soft from years of handling, but the words remained clear. Can you help me find people who won't give up on me either? I hope I did right by you, Mrs. Chen, Michael whispered. I hope keeping the secret was the right choice. He refolded the letter and placed it back in his wallet, carrying it still, as he had for 17 years. 2015. When a nurse named Elena saw Michael Jordan walk through the hospital doors at 2:47 in the morning, 5 years, she knew something incredible was about to happen with blood disorders. But what she didn't know was that she would have to keep this secret for 28 years. She'd learned that medicine wasn't just about knowledge. It was October 17th. It was about 1995. One afternoon, the Chicago Bulls blood journalist researching a book about Michael Jordan's philanthropy, Elena was finishing Chicago Memorial Hospital when a black car pulled up outside. He'd discovered unusual blood drive records from out wearing a baseball cap and sunglasses, even though it was the middle of the night. I'm investigating charitable work. Michael Jordan may have funded anonymously. The journalist explained to hospital administration. He said quietly, I found records of a large private blood drive. Stopped. In September 1995, standing in front of her was Michael Jordan. Do you have anyone, the most famous basketball player in the world, might remember it? But he wasn't there for himself. The request eventually reached Elena He was there to save the life of an 8-year-old girl named Sarah Chen, who was dying from a rare blood disease. After 20 years, here's the thing that made this story even more amazing. Michael Jordan wasn't even supposed to be a match for Sarah's blood type. What Michael Jordan had done. Doctors had tested him weeks before. Said his blood wouldn't work. But she remembered her promise. Michael refused to give up. She remembered Michael's words about why the secret mattered was something most people thought was impossible. Elena responded to the journalist. He spent weeks. I was working here in 1995 and taking special vitamins. I don't recall anything unusual trying to make his own blood compatible with Sarah's. Blood drives happen regularly. He got tested over and over again. I can't help you. Hoping for a miracle. The journalist thanked her and on October 16th, moved on to other leads. Just one day before the story would run out of time, buried. The impossible that evening happened. Elena went home and opened her journal to the entry from October 17th, he could now save her life. She read her own words from 20 years ago. Michael remembering that night in vivid detail. He had a fever of 102 degrees. I kept your secret, Michael. The nurse tried to stop him. She whispered, but I don't know how much longer I can. This could be dangerous for 2018. Michael looked at her with tears in his eyes. Elena Martinez was diagnosed with breast cancer at age 55. She needs blood now. The irony wasn't lost on her. 2:47 she'd spent her career helping collect blood for cancer patients. Michael Jordan donated blood to save a little girl he during her third chemotherapy session, and then receiving a blood transfusion to make him a promise. Elena had an epiphany. Change everything. She was lying in a hospital bed, Don't tell
Blood
anyone
from
I
an
was
anonymous
here.
donor flowing into her veins.
Let Sarah
When she
think
finally
it was
understood
an
what
anonymous
Michael Jordan
stranger.
had known all along.
I don't want her to grow
the donor
up
giving
as
her blood
the
right
girl
now
Michael
was
Jordan
anonymous.
saved.
She'd never know
I want
their
her to
name.
be her own hero.
But their gift was saving
Elena
her life.
kept that promise,
and the
for
anonymity
28 years.
didn't diminish that.
She watched
It
Sarah grow
elevated
up,
it.
become
It
a
meant
doctor,
they'd helped purely
and save
to help,
hundreds of other children.
expecting nothing.
All while Sarah
That's what
had
Michael
no
had wanted
idea
for Sarah.
that her childhood
That
hero
purity
had
of
literally
giving,
given his
that
blood to
freedom
save her
from
life.
obligation.
But why did
Elena
Michael
began to
Jordan
cry,
keep this
not
amazing
from
act of
sadness or
kindness
pain,
a secret for
but
so
from
long?
understanding that had
What
taken
happened when Sarah
23
finally
years to
learned the
fully
truth?
grasp?
And what did Michael
Thank
say
you,
that made the nurse
she whispered
cry
to
when
her
she
anonymous
finally
donor.
told this story?
Whoever you are,
Watch this whole video
thank
to
you.
find out how one
And she
letter
thought
written
about
in
Sarah
purple
Chen,
by a
now
dying
31 years
31-year-old
old,
girl
led
who'd
to
lived
one of the
23
most
years of
beautiful
secrets because
in
Michael
sports
Jordan
history.
had understood this truth.
You won't believe
The greatest
what
gifts
happens next.
are the ones that
Elena
don't bind the
Martinez
receiver
sat in her
to the
small
giver.
Chicago apartment.
Elena
Sunlight
survived
streaming
streaming
through
through the window
The
and
treatments
landing
worked.
on an old hospital
By
badge
2019,
from 1995.
she was cancer-free and back
Her
at work.
hands, wrinkled
But
now
something
at
had
62,
changed.
trembled
She
slightly
knew now,
as she picked
with
up the
absolute
faded ID
certainty,
card, that there would be
the
a
photo
right
showed
time
a
to tell
younger
Michael's
woman
story.
with dark hair and hopeful
Not yet.
eyes.
A woman
But
who
someday,
didn't yet carry the weight
when
of the
that day
secret
came,
she'd held
Elena
for 28
would be ready.
years. The
On the
journal
table
remained
beside
locked
her
in her safe
lay a
deposit
worn
box,
leather journal,
waiting for the
its
moment when
pages
the world
yellowed
needed
and
to hear
soft
about
from age.
greatness that happened
She'd
in
written
silence,
in it only
about
once,
heroism
on a
that
single
no one
October
witnessed,
night,
about
that
a
changed
gift given
everything
at
she understood
2:47
about
a.m.
greatness.
on an October night that
I've kept
changed
this quiet
everything.
for so long.
Someday,
Elena
the
whispered
story
to
would
herself.
matter. Though no one
Someday,
else was in the room,
two people would be ready
maybe
to
too
understand
long.
what Elena had learned
She
during
opened the
her
journal
own battle
carefully,
with cancer.
as if the pages
The most
might
powerful
crumble at her
acts of
touch.
kindness,
The
are
date
often
at the
the
top
ones
read
nobody sees.
October 17th.
The greatest heroes are
1995,
often anonymous.
2:47
And the truest measure of
a.m.
character is
Below
what
it,
we do,
written in
when
hurried
no one
handwriting,
is watching.
were words she'd
Michael
memorized
Jordan had
long
understood
ago.
that 23 years
Michael
ago.
Jordan just
Now
walked
finally,
through the door.
Elena understood
For nearly
it too.
3 decades,
Elena had watched the
2023.
world celebrate Michael
28
Jordan. Years later,
She'd seen his
Elena
championships,
Martinez sat
his Hall
in her
of Fame
small
induction,
Chicago apartment
his
on a bright
legendary
morning in
status
March.
grow with each
62
passing year.
years old,
The
and
world
officially
knew him
retired
as the
after
greatest
35
basketball
years of
player
nursing.
who ever lived.
She'd handed
But
over her
Elena knew
responsibilities
something
at
else.
Chicago Memorial
She
Hospital
knew about a
2
night
months
when
ago,
greatness had nothing to
walked
do
out
with
of the blood
basketball.
donation center for the
The
last
world
time,
talked about Michael's
and felt
6
the weight of
championship
decades
rings
lift from her shoulders.
Elena remembered his blood
But
type.
one weight remained.
They discussed his
The
competitive
secret
fire.
she'd carried for 28
She remembered
years.
his quiet compassion.
Leaned on her coffee table, sat
They
3
analyzed
items.
his jump shot.
Her faded
She
hospital
remembered
badge
him
from
wincing in pain
1995
as he rolled up
her
his
worn
sleeve.
leather journal,
It's
and a
time,
letter that had
Elena
arrived
said
yesterday
firmly,
from a
closing
documentary
the journal and
filmmaker
holding it
requesting an
against her
interview
chest.
about the history of blood
People need
donation
to understand
in Chicago.
what really makes someone great.
The filmmaker had no idea
She thought about
Michael
Sarah
Jordan.
Chen.
The
reason
request
this
was
story
routine,
existed at all.
professional. An
But it had
8-year-old
triggered
girl
something
who'd
in
written
Elena.
one desperate
A
letter.
feeling that time was running
A
out.
grandmother who'd prayed
stories
for a
left
miracle
untold became
a hospital
lost
room
forever.
covered in Michael
She was
Jordan
62.
posters. Michael
And
was
blood.
60.
Rare,
How many more years
precious,
did they have to make sure
life-saving
this
blood
story survived?
that came from an anonymous
How
donor
many more
in the
years
middle of the
before
night?
the people who'd
But
witnessed
the story
that October
wasn't
night
just
were
about
gone,
blood.
and the truth
It was about a
disappeared with them?
promise.
Michael had made Elena
keep.
opened her laptop
A
and
promise
searched
for
that had felt
Dr.
impossible
Sarah
at Chen,
times.
Chicago. How many moments
Multiple
had she
results
wanted to
appeared.
speak? Sarah
How
had
many
become
times had
prominent in her
reporters
field,
asked about
a
famous
leading
donors?
pediatric oncologist.
How many nights
A published
had she
researcher,
lain awake,
advocate for
wondering
blood
if
donation,
silence was the same as
At
lying?
36 years old, she'd
What
saved
Michael
hundreds
did
of
that
lives.
night.
One
Elena
article
paused,
featured an
her voice
interview.
catching.
Dr.
She
Chen
was practicing
credits
for the
her
interview
own
she'd
childhood
finally
battle
agreed
with
to
a
give,
rare blood disorder
rehearsing
as
words
her
that had lived
inspiration
only
for
in her
entering
mind
medicine.
for so long.
An
It
anonymous
wasn't
donor
just about
saved my
blood.
life when I was 8.
It was about
She
a
explains,
promise he made to
I've
someone
spent
he'd
my
never
career
met.
trying to pay that
And by the time
forward.
you understand why he
Elena
came,
clicked through
you'll
photos of
understand
Sarah
what
at
true
medical
greatness
conferences,
really means.
at blood drives, at
She
charity
stood
events,
and walked to her bedroom
in
closet,
several pictures,
reaching up
Sarah
to the
wore
top
a small
shelf.
pin on her lapel.
Her fingers found a small
Number
wooden
23.
box she hadn't opened in
Even
years.
now, after
On
all
inside
these
was a
years,
newspaper clipping
Sarah
from
honored
November
Michael
1995, not knowing. Local
Never
girl
knowing.
beats rare blood disorder.
Eleanor picked up her phone
Anonymous
and dialed a
donor
number she'd
saves
saved
life.
28 years ago.
The photo
but never
showed Sarah
used.
Chen, Denise
tiny
Freeman
and frail,
had
in a
long since
hospital
left
bed,
her position as
smiling
Michael's
weakly
assistant.
at the camera.
See, but they'd stayed
Her
in occasional
grandmother stood
contact
beside her,
over the years.
one hand
Two
raised
people
toward
bound by a
heaven in
shared secret.
gratitude.
Elena
Elena had cut out
Denise's
that
voice
article
was
and saved
surprised.
it, unable
It's been
to
years.
tell the grandmother
How are
that
you?
she knew exactly
good.
who'd saved
Retired
Sarah's
now.
life.
Denise,
Unable to
I need
say
to ask
that
you
the
something,
anonymous donor
and
was
I need
the
you
most
to be
famous
honest.
athlete in the world,
Okay.
who'd driven to the
Is it
hospital
time?
alone,
Is
without
it finally
security
time
or
to tell the
fanfare,
story?
while fighting the
There was a
flu.
long pause.
Sarah
Denise
Chen,
knew exactly
Elena
what
said
story
aloud,
Elena meant.
testing the name on her
I
lips.
don't know. Denise
Everything
said quietly.
started because
Michael
of an
never
8-year-old
gave me
girl
permission to
who
talk
wrote
about
one
it.
letter.
He's been clear
But
for
she
28
wouldn't
years
explain
that
the
yet.
secret
Stays
not fully.
secret.
Because to understand
Sarah
October
is 36
17th,
now.
1995,
She's established
you
her
had
own
to
life,
understand
her
July
own career.
1995.
She's not
While
a
you had
child
to
who needs
understand a little
protection
girl's
anymore.
desperation,
Don't
a
you think she
grandmother's
deserves
faith,
to know the truth?
and a letter that should have been lost
does
in a
knowing
pile
change?
of 10,000 others.
She's lived a full, free
You had
life
to
without
understand
that
why
knowledge.
Michael Jordan
Why
read that
burden
letter
her
3
now?
times. Elena
Why
had
he
thought
made
about
phone
this
calls
question
at
for
midnight.
months. Why he
Because the
organized a
truth
blood
isn't a
drive that
burden.
nobody knew about.
It's a gift.
Why he
Sarah
tested
had
his
spent
blood
28
again
years
and again,
believing a stranger saved
hoping
her.
for a miracle of
Knowing it was
compatibility.
Michael doesn't diminish
Why he
that.
came to the hospital
It
at
deepens it.
2:47 in the morning.
It shows her
alone
that
that
even
even
sick,
someone with everything
to keep a
chose
promise
to
to
give
give
a
more.
child he'd never met.
It proves that greatness
Elena
isn't
placed
about
the newspaper
fame or
clipping back in the
recognition.
box and returned
You
it
want
to the
to
shelf.
tell her.
She sat
I
down
want
at her
to tell
kitchen table,
everyone,
opened her
Elena
laptop,
admitted.
and began
But yes,
to type. I want Sarah
to
to
understand
know first.
that night,
She deserves
she
to
wrote,
understand what
I
happened
need to
that
take
night.
you back to where it all began.
Have you thought about
3
how
months
this affects
earlier.
Michael? Her fingers
He's
paused
60
over
years
the
old,
keyboard.
Elena.
On then
He's
she
built
began
his
to tell the
legend on the
story.
court.
The world had waited
What if people
28
think he
years
kept
to
this
hear
secret?
because he wanted to
July
control the narrative.
1995.
Oh, what if they accuse him of
Chicago's
using
Lakeview
Sarah's
neighborhood
story for
sweltered
eventual
under a
publicity?
merciless summer sun.
Then we tell
Inside
them he
a
fought
small
against
brick house
publicity
on
for
Oakdale
28
Avenue.
years.
We show
Eight-year-old
them the
Sarah
journal
Chen
entries,
sat
the
at her grandmother's
documentation,
kitchen table,
the proof that he
a blank
never
piece
wanted
of
credit.
notebook paper in front of
Denise
her, and
the
a
world
purple
needs
crayon
this story.
clutched in her small
Not
hand.
because it makes Michael look good.
Grammy, but
How
because
do you
it
teach
spells
a
people
special?
what real
Sarah
kindness looks
asked.
like. Her voice
Denise
weak and
sighed.
thin. You need to
Margaret
talk to
Chen
him.
looked up from
Not
the dishes
me.
she was washing.
This is Michael's decision.
Her granddaughter looked so
Can you
small
arrange it?
sitting there, her legs
can try.
dangling from the chair,
But Elena,
her skin
be
pale
prepared for
despite
him
the
to
summer
say
heat.
no. Michael's
Dark
convictions
circles run
shadowed
deep.
Sarah's eyes.
He might believe Sarah's
eyes that
better
used
off
to
never
sparkle
knowing.
with mischief.
But
2
now
weeks later,
mostly showed
Elena
exhaustion.
received a message. Michael Jordan would meet with her.
CIAL.
One conversation. Margaret
No
said
promises.
gently, drying
Charlotte,
her hands
North
on a
Carolina.
dish towel, where Michael now
What
owned
are you
the
writing?
Hornets.
So sweet
Elena
girl?
booked a flight.
A letter
She
to
arrived
Michael
at the
Jordan,
Hornets practice
Sarah
facility on a
replied,
Tuesday
carefully
afternoon.
forming each letter.
A staff member
Her
escorted
hand
her
shook
to a
slightly
private
from
office,
weakness,
where
making
Michael
the
Jordan
words
sat
wobbly
behind a
and
desk.
uneven.
Older now,
Margaret's heart
but
clenched.
unmistakable. Sarah had been
The
writing
years
letters
had
to
added
Michael
gray
Jordan
to his
since she
hair,
was 6 years
lines
old,
to his face,
before the accident
but his
that
eyes
took her
held the same
parents,
intensity she
before the
remembered from that
diagnosis
October
that
night.
changed everything.
Ms. Martinez,
The Bulls' superstar,
Michael stood,
had become
extending
Sarah's
his hand.
hero. Her
It's been a long
inspiration,
time.
her reason to keep
28
fighting
years.
when her body wanted to
Thank
give
you
up.
for seeing me.
The walls of Sarah's
They
bedroom
sat across
were
from
covered
each
with
other,
Michael Jordan
and for a
posters.
moment, neither spoke.
Number 23 in
The weight
mid-flight,
of shared history
tongue
filled
out,
the silence.
defying gravity.
Denise said you want to tell the
Championship
story.
celebrations.
Michael began.
Magazine covers.
Why now?
Sarah had watched
Elena
every
chose her
Bulls
words
game
carefully.
she could.
Because
Even
I
from her
finally
hospital
understand
bed,
why
clutching
you wanted
her worn
silence.
basketball and
I
pretending
spent
she could fly
23
like
years
him.
thinking you were being
But this
overly
letter
cautious,
was different.
protecting
Margaret
yourself
could
from
see it in the
criticism
way
or
Sarah bit her lip,
exploitation.
concentrating
But when
so
I had
hard
cancer
on each
5
word.
years ago,
2
when I
weeks
received
ago,
blood
Dr.
from an
Patel had
anonymous
delivered
donor,
news that made
I
Margaret's
finally got
world
it.
stop spinning.
The gift is pure
Sarah's
without
rare
names
blood
attached.
disorder,
A condition
the
she'd been
kindness is
managing
truer
for 3
without
years,
expectation of thanks,
had taken a dangerous turn.
Michael nodded slowly.
The treatments weren't working
So if you
anymore.
understand why I
Sarah
wanted
needed
silence,
blood transfusions.
why do you want to
But
break
not
it? Just any blood.
Because
She
there's a
needed an
difference
extremely
between
rare
permanent
type
silence
called the Bombay
and temporary
blood group.
protection.
So rare,
Sarah needed
that only
anonymity
about 4
to
people
grow
in
up
every
free.
million had it.
She's had that.
We're searching
28
every
years of
registry
freedom.
we can access.
But now,
Dr. Patel had
as a
explained,
doctor who saved
his kind
lives the
eyes
way
filled
hers
with
was
concern.
saved? Don't
But
you
in
think she
Sarah's
deserves
ethnic
to know the
background,
complete truth?
the odds are even lower.
What does knowing
Maybe
change?
1 in 10,000.
It changes how she understands the world.
Donors quickly,
Elena
Mrs.
said
Chen.
passionately.
Within weeks.
Right now,
Not months.
Sarah believes a random
Margaret had
stranger
nodded,
saved her,
unable to speak.
which is beautiful.
By holding Sarah's hand,
But knowing
as
it
the
was
doctor
you,
outlined their options,
knowing that someone with
clinical
every
trials,
privilege chose to give
experimental
anyway,
treatments,
knowing
hope
that you
wrapped in
organized
medical
500
terminology
people to be tested,
she didn't fully understand.
knowing that you came to the hospital
That
at
night,
2:47
Margaret had
a.m.
prayed
while
harder
fighting
than
the
she'd
flu.
ever prayed in her
That
life.
teaches her something deeper
She'd lost
about
her
what's
son
possible
and
when we
daughter-in-law
care.
2 years ago.
Michael
When a
leaned
drunk
back
driver
in his
ran a
chair,
red light, studying Elena.
She couldn't lose Sarah,
or it
too.
makes her feel obligated
She wouldn't
to
survive
me.
it.
It makes her feel
Now,
like she owes me
watching
something.
her granddaughter labor
It changes
over
our
this
relationship from
Margaret
strangers
felt tears
who never met
threaten
to
to
donor
spill.
and recipient. Sarah still
I don't
believed
want
in
that
heroes.
for her.
Still believed
What if I
that
told
good
her
things
first,
happen to people who
before
tried
making
hard
it
enough?
public?
Still
her
believed
process
that
it
Michael
privately,
Jordan,
who
decide
never
how
gave
she
up on the
feels
court,
about it, could
give her
somehow help
control
her
over her own
not
reaction.
give up either. And then what? What are you telling
write a
him?
book? Margaret
Make a
asked
documentary?
softly,
Turn
sitting
this
down
into a
beside Sarah.
feel-good story that gets
Sarah
commodified
looked
and
up,
sold?
her thin face serious.
Elena flinched at the
I'm not
harshness in
asking
his
him
voice.
to visit me.
Is that
Scrammy.
really what you think
I know
want?
he's really busy.
Michael's
And I'm not
expression
asking for an
softened.
autograph or
No,
tickets or
I'm
anything
sorry.
like that. I know you've kept
What are
this
you
secret
asking for,
faithfully
then?
for 28 years.
Sarah's eyes
I
filled
know
with
you care
tears,
about Sarah,
but she blinked them back.
But Elena,
at 8
once
years
this
old,
story is
she'd
out,
learned not
we
to
can't
cry
control
about her
it.
illness.
It becomes
Crying
headlines,
scared Grammy.
think pieces,
And Grammy was the
debates
only person
about
she
whether
had
I
left
should
in
have
the
gone
world.
public. It becomes
I'm asking
noise.
him to help find blood
and
donors.
Sarah gets caught
Sarah
in
whispered,
that noise.
Dr. Patel
Or,
says, I need
Elena
special
countered,
blood. It becomes
Mr.
an
Jordan
example. Is really good
It becomes
at impossible
proof
shots.
that the world has
Maybe
more
he's
goodness
good
than
at
we see.
impossible things, too.
It becomes a story that
Margaret's
inspires
throat
people to help
tightened.
quietly.
She pulled Sarah
give
into a gentle
without
hug,
expectation,
careful not to squeeze
understand
too
that
hard. Real heroism
Sarah's bones
doesn't
felt
require
fragile,
an audience.
like a small bird's.
Michael was quiet for
That's
a long time,
very smart,
staring
sweetheart.
at his hands.
Margaret managed to say,
When he finally spoke,
very
his voice
smart.
was soft. Sarah pulled
I've
back
carried
and
Sarah's
returned to
letter
her
in my
wallet for
Purple
28
crayon
years.
moving slowly
Every
across the
wallet I've
page.
owned. And Margaret
I
watched
take it
over
out
her
sometimes
shoulder as
and
the
read
words
it.
took shape. Sure, can you help me
Dear
find
Mr.
people
Jordan,
who won't give up on
my
me?
name is Sarah.
I did.
I am
help
8
her.
years old.
And part of
I
that
am
help
sick and
was
need
giving her
special
the
blood
freedom
that
to
is hard
become
to
her own
find.
person. The
Not
doctors are
someone
looking,
defined
but they
by
need
me.
help. You are the
You
greatest
succeeded,
because you
Elena
never
said
give
gently.
up. Even
Sarah
when the other
is her
team
own
is winning,
person.
you keep
She's
trying.
Dr. Sarah Chen.
You make impossible
an accomplished
shots.
physician who
Can
saves
you help me
lives.
find people who
Your
won't give up on
anonymity
me
gave her
either?
that.
But
People
Michael,
who have the
she's
special
also
blood I
someone
need.
who wears a number
I
23
watch you play
pin
basketball
every day,
and it makes me feel
who
like I
tells
can be
patients
strong
about
too.
never giving up.
You
Who
teach me
credits
that
you as her
anything is
childhood
possible
hero
if you
without
don't give
knowing
up.
you literally saved
Thank you
her
for
life.
reading my letter.
Don't you think there's poetry
Love.
in that? Don't
Sarah.
you think she deserves to know that her
At the
hero
bottom,
was real
Sarah
in
drew a
ways she
basketball
never
with her
imagined?
purple crayon,
Michael
then added
stood
stars
and
around
walked
it.
to the window.
Her
Looking
signature
out
was
at
shaky,
the practice court,
but determined.
where players were running drills.
There, Sarah said,
What if she's angry?
setting down the crayon.
What if she feels
Do you
deceived?
think he'll read it?
What
Grammy?
if she's grateful?
What
Margaret
if it
wanted to
heals
be something in
honest?
her she didn't
She
know
wanted
was
to
broken.
prepare
Sarah for the likelihood
What
that
if it
this
breaks
letter would
something
never
that
reach
didn't
Michael
need fixing?
Jordan's hands? Elena
That
stood
it would be filed
and
away
joined
with
him at the
thousands
window.
of other fan letters.
Michael, that
I'm
even if he
62
did see
years
it,
old.
he was
You're
just one
60.
man who couldn't solve
In another
every
20
problem.
years, we
But
might
looking
not
at her
be here to
granddaughter's
tell this
hopeful
story.
face, at
It'll
those
die
eyes
with
that had
us,
seen too much
and Sarah
suffering
will
for
never
8
know the
years,
truth.
Margaret couldn't
Is that
bring
really
herself
what
to
you
dim
want?
that small light of
For her
hope.
to spend her whole life
I
not
think,
knowing?
Margaret said carefully,
Maybe.
that you wrote a
Michael
beautiful
said
letter.
honestly.
And tomorrow,
Maybe that's
we'll
exactly
put it in the
what
mail.
I want.
And then
Maybe some
we'll
things
see
are
what
meant
happens.
to stay buried.
We have to believe,
And maybe,
right, Grammy?
Elena replied.
Sarah's voice
Some
was so
stories are
small,
meant to be told
so
when the
full of
time is
faith.
right.
Like
And I
you
think
always
the time
say,
is right
we
now.
have to believe in
Michael
miracles.
turned to face her. Yes,
If I
baby.
agree to this,
Margaret
and I'm
whispered,
not saying
kissing
I am,
the top of
how
Sarah's
would it
head.
work? How do we
Or
tell
we have
Sarah
to
without
believe.
creating a media circus? That evening,
I
Margaret
tell her
addressed
first.
an envelope to the
Just her.
Chicago Bulls office. I show her my journal.
She didn't know the
I'd
exact
explain everything,
address,
so
let
she
her
looked it
process
up
it.
in the phone book.
Then,
writing
if she wants
carefully
to
make
share
sure
the story
every letter
publicly,
was legible.
we do it on her terms.
She wanted whoever
If she
received
wants
this
to keep
letter
it
to
private,
take it seriously.
mysteriously.
We keep it private.
To see that it came
We
from
give her
real
the
people
choice.
with a real need. And the journal? On the back
The
of the envelope,
documentation?
she wrote their
I
return
give it to her.
address.
It's
Then,
her story
in the corner,
more than it's ours.
she added 3 words in her
Michael
careful
considered
handwriting.
this.
Wrestling with
Urgent
28 years of
medical.
conviction. Finally,
Maybe it would
he
help.
spoke. Maybe someone
I need
would
to think
see
about
those
this.
words and pay attention.
Give me time.
Maybe. How much time?
The next morning,
Margaret
know.
and Sarah walked
But Elena,
3 blocks to the
you've
post
waited
office.
28 years.
Sarah insisted
Can you
on
wait
carrying
a
the letter
little
herself.
longer?
Clutching it.
Elena wanted
like
to
it
say
contained
no,
all her hopes.
wanted to push.
At the
Wanted
mailbox,
to make him
she
understand
stood on
the
tiptoes
urgency
and pushed
but
the
looking
envelope
at his
through the
face,
slot. Seeing the genuine
"Bye,
conflict there,
letter," she
Sarah
understood
whispered that this decision
"Please,
couldn't be rushed.
Find Mr. Jordan. I can wait." She
Margaret
agreed.
held Sarah's hand
But Michael,
as they walked home slowly.
Not forever.
Sarah
At some
tired
point,
easily these
the
days,
time needing
makes
to
the
rest
decision
every
for
few
us.
minutes.
By the time
parted
they
with a
reached their
handshake.
house,
Two
Sarah
people
was
who'd
exhausted
shared an
and
extraordinary
went straight
moment
to bed for a
and
nap.
protected its secret for nearly
Margaret
3
sat in her
decades.
kitchen alone,
Elena
staring
flew
at
back to
nothing,
Chicago,
praying
unsure
to a God
whether
she
she'd
hoped
convinced
was
him.
listening. But she'd
The letter
planted a
traveled
seed.
through the postal system.
Now she had to trust
one white
that it would
envelope
grow
among millions.
3 months passed.
It arrived at the
Elena
Chicago
heard
Bulls
nothing
office
from Michael
3
or
days
Denise.
later.
She
In
began to
July
accept that maybe he'd
1995,
never agree.
when Michael
That
Jordan
the story
was at
would
the
die
absolute
untold
peak
of his powers
Then,
and fame.
in June 2023,
it landed in a
her phone
mailroom
rang.
where a young man named
Elena,
Marcus Webb
it's Denise.
sorted through
Michael's
an
made a
endless
decision.
flood of fan mail.
Elena's heart raced.
10,000 letters
And?
arrived every week.
He wants to meet with Sarah
10,000
first.
pleas for
Just him
autographs,
and her.
tickets.
He wants to tell her
donations,
himself, privately,
appearances,
before any public
and
disclosure.
10,000 people who wanted
wants
a
to
piece
look
of
her in
Michael
the eye
Jordan's time
and explain
his
why he
attention,
stayed silent.
his magic.
If Sarah's okay with
Sarah's
telling
letter
the story
should have
after that,
disappeared into
he'll
that
support
flood.
it.
But it
Should
has
have
to
received
start
a
with her
form
knowing.
letter response
Tears
and a
filled Elena's
photocopied
eyes.
signature.
When?
Should have been forgotten.
He's arranging it now.
But Marcus
probably
Webb had
within
a
a month.
6-year-old daughter
Elena,
named Jessica.
Thank you.
3 years
pushing,
ago, Jessica
caring,
had fought leukemia.
for keeping the secret
She'd
all
needed
these
blood
years,
transfusions
and knowing when it
bone
was
marrow,
time to break it.
Miracles. Will I
She'd
be there when he
survived,
tells her? But those months
No.
had aged Marcus a
Michael
lifetime.
thinks this conversation
He remembered
needs to be
the
just between
desperation,
them.
the fear,
But afterward,
the feeling of
if Sarah wants to
helplessness
talk
as he
to you,
watched his daughter
he'll
suffer.
arrange it.
When Marcus
Elena
opened
hung
Sarah's
up,
envelope and
feeling
read
a
her
mixture
letter,
of relief
his hands
and
began
anxiety.
to shake. He read
After
it 28
once,
years,
twice,
Sarah would finally
3
know
times.
the truth. The
Then
question
Marcus
was,
Webb did
how
something
would
he'd
that
never
truth
done in 2
change her?
years of working in the Bulls mailroom?
In Philadelphia,
Dr.
Dr.
Sarah
Sarah
was
Chen
against
went about her
protocol
daily work
on something
completely
that
unaware
could get him fired.
that her entire
He
understanding
walked
of her
past his
childhood
supervisor's office.
was about to shift.
He climbed the stairs to
She
the
treated
executive
patients.
level.
He
ran
walked
blood
directly
drives,
to the office of
wore
Denise
her number
Freeman,
23
Michael
pin
Jordan's personal
on
assistant,
and never
and
imagined
he knocked
that
on
Michael
her door.
Jordan, her childhood
Denise
hero,
Freeman looked up from her
was
desk,
arranging a meeting
surprised to
that
see
would
a mailroom
rewrite her
clerk
personal
standing in her
history.
doorway. In the 2
Elena
years
opened
she'd
her
worked
journal
as
one
Michael
more
Jordan's
time,
personal
reading
assistant.
the entry from
Not
October
once had
17,
someone from the mailroom
1995
bypassed every level
she
of
added
protocol
one
to
final
reach her
note.
office. June 15th.
Can I help you?
She asked,
2023.
eyebrows raised. After
Marcus
28
Webb
years,
shifted nervously.
Michael has
Sarah's
agreed to
letter
tell Sarah
clutched
the
in
truth.
his hand.
I don't know
Ms.
what
Freeman,
will happen when she learns.
I know I'm not supposed
I don't
to
know
be
if I
here.
did the right thing.
I know
by
there's a
pushing
process
for fan mail,
but I know
but
the
I need
truth
you to give
matters.
this letter to Mr.
I know
Jordan
that stories deserve
directly
to be told
to him.
And I know
Not
that
in
what
a
Michael
pile,
did that night,
not with a summary.
the blood,
and he needs to read it
sacrifice,
himself. The silence
Denise set down
changed
her pen.
more than Sarah's life.
She received dozens
It
of
changed
requests
mine
like
too.
this every week.
It showed me what real
Everyone
greatness
thought their
looks
letter
like.
was special
And soon,
urgent,
the world
deserving
will
of
know.
Michael's personal attention.
Elena closed
She'd
the
learned
journal
to be firm
and waited for the
but
phone to
kind
ring
in these
for
situations.
Sarah to learn the truth.
I appreciate your
For the
concern,
secret she'd
she
carried
said.
for 28
But Mr.
years.
Jordan
to
receives
finally,
thousands of letters.
carefully,
We have a
beautifully
system.
be revealed.
My daughter had leukemia.
The silence was about
Marcus
to speak.
interrupted, his
And
voice
what it would
breaking
say
slightly.
would change
3 years
everything.
ago, she needed
July
blood
2023.
She almost
Dr.
died.
Sarah Chen received an
He held up
unusual
Sarah's
call on a
letter.
Wednesday morning.
This little girl is
her
dying.
assistant, Maria,
She's not asking
knocked
for
on
an
her
autograph.
office door looking confused.
She's asking for help finding blood
Dr.
donors.
Chen,
Please,
there's
just
someone
read
from
it.
the Charlotte Hornets.
Something
on the
in
phone.
Marcus's eyes made
They're
Denise
asking if you'd be
pause.
available
She'd
for a
worked
meeting
with
with
enough
the owner.
desperate people to
Something
recognize
about a
genuine
private
anguish
matter
when she
related to
saw
your
it.
work with blood
She held out her
donation
hand.
advocacy. Marcus gave
Sarah's
her the letter.
eyebrows rose.
His hand trembling
The
slightly.
Hornets? Michael
Denise read
Jordan's team?
Sarah's words, written in
guess so.
purple crayon with a
Should I tell
child's
them you're not
unsteady
interested?
hand. She
Sarah's
read about
heart
the special
skipped.
blood,
Michael
about
Jordan
not giving
wanted
up,
to meet with her?
about believing
After all
in
these years
impossible
of admiring
things.
him from a distance,
She saw
of
the
wearing his
basketball
number,
drawing with
of
stars
crediting
around
him
it,
as her her inspiration? She noticed the shaky signature.
No, Sarah said
When she looked
slowly.
up, her professional mask had
interested.
cracked. What are the details? How did this come to you? The arrangement was specific. Random sorting. Sarah would fly to Charlotte the following week. The meeting would be private. 300 letters and Mr. Jordan. But when I saw media, urgent, staff, medical, no publicity on the back, transportation and accommodation would be provided. The topic would be explained in person. I remembered sitting in a hospital room with my Jessica, confusion mixed with strangers to donate blood. Why would Michael Jordan want to meet with her? To care about a little girl they blood donation work? Some of was he considering supporting her programs? That's why Jessica is alive. She told no one except her roommate. Denise Jennifer read the letter again, and only because she needed someone to cover her on-call duties. 8 years old. It's a rare Michael blood Jordan disorder. Wants to meet with you. Running out of time. Jennifer squealed. Sarah, I'll make sure he sees this is insane. He said finally. You've idolized him since you were a kid. I promise you that. I know. Marcus's shoulders. I don't understand what he wants. Thank you. But I'm not passing this so much. The following After Tuesday, Marcus left, Sarah Denise flew to Charlotte alone with Sarah's letter. A car met her at the airport and drove her to the Hornets facility. In her time working for Michael. She wore professional clothes, sick a children, navy blazer, and worthy slacks, causes, and the small number 23 piece of his time and generosity on her lapel. Michael gave to many of them. He was escorted to a private more than the public ever knew, and there he was. But he was also careful. Michael Jordan stood when she entered. Meant that people looking constantly tried to use his name, unmistakable, his money, his influence. He wore casual clothes. Something about this letter felt different, and his wasn't manipulative. Serious. It wasn't professionally crafted by a charity's PR team. He extended his hand. It was just a scared little girl coming, asking a hero Mr. for Jordan. Help. The only way Sarah she shook his hand. Her own that trembling evening, slightly after a grueling practice session. It's an honor to meet you. Michael Jordan sat alone in his office at the United Center. Please, it was nearly 9 o'clock. Can I get you anything? Most of the staff had gone home. The building was quiet, except for the distant sounds of cleaning crews. Why am I here? Michael liked these moments of solitude. This was about blood donation during the day, but he belonged to everyone. It's related to that. Teammates, coaches, Michael interrupted media, gently, fans, but it's more personal late at night, than you might expect. In the silence of his office, Sarah, he could just call you Sarah? He was exhausted. Michael poured 2 glasses of 95 season. His hands had been challenging, but his face betraying emotion. Sarah couldn't identify. Summer training was intense from her as he prepared for the upcoming season. At 32 years old, his body demanded more recovery time. Last time I saw you, you were 8 years old. Every practice, unconscious in a hospital bed. Every year. Sarah's confusion deepened. A knock on his door interrupted his thoughts. I don't understand. Come in, he called. We've never met. Denise entered, holding a single piece of paper. Not formally. I know you're tired. I've known about you for 28 years. But I need you to read something before you leave tonight. Michael reached into his jacket pocket. Michael gestured to the chair across from his desk. What is it? Do you recognize this? A letter from a fan. He unfolded it carefully. An 8-year-old girl placed it on the table between them. Sarah leaned forward and felt her breath catch. Denise, purple crayon. We talked about this. Childish handwriting. I can't personally respond to a drawing of a basketball with stars around it. Just read it. Denise said gently. That's placing the letter on his desk. The one I wrote to you when I was 8. There was something in her voice was barely a whisper. Pick up the letter instead of arguing. You actually got it? He began reading Sarah's words. I read it 3 times the night it reached me. He read it once. His expression neutral. I need to tell you what happened after that. Then he read it again, because you deserve to know the truth about who saved your life. The Sarah's heart began nearly a minute. The anonymous donor, as Michael's jaw tightened. You know who it was? As he swallowed hard. Michael's eyes filled with tears. He didn't try to hide the paper. Sarah, where does she live? There was no anonymous stranger. It was me. I donated the blood that saved your life. Address on October 17th, 1995. What do we know about her situation? Sarah gripped the edge of the table, her mind racing, unable to process what she'd just heard. The mailroom clerk who brought it to me said his daughter had leukemia. Not possible. He recognized the desperation in the letter. I remember Grammy saying he believed they tested so many people and nobody matched. Michael set the letter down carefully. I wasn't compatible as if it might break, Michael explained. He leaned back in his chair and closed his eyes. In August 1995, waited. My blood type learned that Michael needed space to process things, especially things that touched him, researchers. I learned that blood compatibility can sometimes change based on diet. Finally. Eyes still closed, body chemistry, internal bleeding. I spent weeks trying to alter my own blood. I remember sitting in that hospital waiting room. That's medically almost impossible. Feeling completely helpless. Her doctor's mind engaging. Some stranger even donated her blood and saved her life. Almost. I never found out who it was, but not completely. He opened his eyes and looked at Denise. By mid-October, my blood had changed enough. I was
knowing that
retested
someone
on
I'd
October
never
16th.
met
cared enough
I
about
became
another human
compatible.
being to give part of themselves.
Michael's voice broke.
No cameras,
You were dying,
no credit,
Sarah.
just because
You
it
had
was
less
the
than
right thing to
24
do.
hours.
And I came
What
to the
do you want
hospital
me
at
to do?
2:47 in
Denise
the
asked.
morning to donate blood
Michael
for your
picked up the
transfusion.
letter again,
Studying
Sarah's
Sarah's
drawing
eyes
of the
filled
basketeers.
with stars.
You came in the
Find
middle
out
of the night.
everything about Sarah Chen.
I was fighting the
her
flu,
medical condition,
fever of
what she
102.
needs, whether this
The
is
nurse,
real.
Elena
Do
Martinez.
it quietly.
Do you remember
No
that
press,
name?
No
She
announcements.
tried to stop me.
Just get me facts.
Said it wasn't safe.
And if
But
it's
I'd
real,
been
cleared by my physician.
Then we
and
help
you
her.
were running out of time.
Michael's voice
So
was
I
firm.
donated anyway.
But Denise,
You donated
this
blood while
stays
sick?
between us.
Sarah's
don't want
medical
this
training
becoming a
kicked
media
in.
story.
That could have
This
been
isn't
dangerous
about
for
Michael
you.
Jordan helping
The
a
strain
sick
on your
kid.
immune system.
This is about a little
I know.
girl who needs blood
But
donors.
Sarah,
And if
what
I
was
can
I
help make
supposed
that
to do?
happen,
let
we
you
will.
die because I had the
Over
flu?
the next week,
Your life
Denise
was
made
worth more than
careful
my
inquiries.
discomfort. She
Sarah
called
stood
Chicago
abruptly,
Memorial Hospital,
walking to the window,
claiming to be from
her
a
back
private
to Michael.
foundation reviewing
Her
potential
mind was
cases for
reeling,
assistance.
trying to reconcile.
She spoke with
28
Dr.
years
Raj
of believing
Patel,
one truth
Sarah's
with
primary
this new
physician.
reality. Hey,
The
why
picture
didn't you
that
tell
emerged
me?
broke
Her
her
voice
heart.
cracked.
Sarah
Grammy
Chen,
spent years
8
trying
years
to
old,
find the donor.
orphaned 2
She
years
died
ago
never
in a car
knowing.
accident.
Why did you
Raised by
stay
her
silent?
grandmother on a fixed income.
Michael stood too,
Diagnosed
but kept
with a
his
rare
distance.
blood disorder that
Because I
required
didn't want your
increasingly
story to
frequent
become about me.
transfusions. Her
You
condition
wrote
had
asking
recently
for help
worsened,
finding donors,
and she needed blood with
not
the Bombay
asking
blood
me to
group.
save you.
Extraordinarily
If I'd gone
rare,
public,
especially
you would have
in
grown
her
up as
ethnic
the
background.
girl Michael Jordan saved.
We're searching every registry
article
we have
about
access
you,
to.
every
Dr.
interview,
Patel had
every
explained,
accomplishment,
but we
would be
need more
tied back
donors to
me.
test.
I
The more
didn't
people
want
we
that
screen,
for you,
the better chance we have
so
of
you let
finding
me
compatible
believe it was a
matches.
stranger.
Time is
I
critical.
wanted you to believe
Without
in the goodness of
transfusions,
strangers.
Sarah has weeks.
I wanted you to
to
grow
maybe a
up
month.
knowing that people help each other
Denise
because it's
reported
right,
everything to Michael.
not because of who they
They
are
sat in his
or
office
what they
late
get in
one
return.
evening. The gravity
Michael's
of the
voice
situation
grew stronger.
settling over them.
Sarah, she's running
Look
out
at
of
who
time.
you became.
Denise said
So
quietly.
you're a doctor who saves children
Michael was
with blood
silent
disorders.
for a long moment,
You
staring at
organized
Sarah's
blood
letter,
drives,
which he'd kept
you
on his desk
advocate
all
for
week.
anonymous donation.
Finally, he
you
spoke.
built your life on the
Test
belief
my
that
blood.
strangers can
See if
be
I'm
heroes.
compatible.
Would you have
Michael,
become that person
do
if
it
you'd
quietly.
known it was me?
I'll go to a private lab.
Sarah turned to face
Don't use
him,
my name.
tears
Just
streaming
test me.
down her face.
And if
I
you're
don't
not
know.
a match,
Maybe not.
Michael's jaw set in
Maybe
that
I
determined
would have
way.
felt
Denise
obligated
had
to
seen
you
countless
instead of
times on the
inspired by
basketball court.
humanity.
Then
She wiped
I'll
her
find
eyes.
people who are.
But Michael,
I'll organize a blood drive.
I've worn your number
Bring in
for donors.
28 years. Screen everyone we can.
I've told every
but it has to
patient
be done
that
quietly,
you taught me
Denise.
never to give
no
up.
publicity.
I've
no
credited
press
you as
releases.
my hero.
No using
without
my
knowing
name
you
to make
literally
this about
saved
me.
my life.
Why?
And that,
Denise asked.
Michael said gently,
You could raise awareness.
is exactly why
get
I
thousands
stayed
of
silent.
people
to donate. You made me your hero
Because Sarah
for the right
wrote to me
reasons,
asking for help,
because of what I
finding
represented,
donors,
not
asking
because
to
of
be
what I'd
saved
done
by
for
Michael
you
Jordan
specifically.
He interrupted.
Your gratitude
If I
was
make
pure
this public,
because it
her
wasn't
story
personal.
becomes about me.
You weren't grateful to
becomes
Michael Jordan,
the girl
donor.
Michael Jordan helped.
You were grateful to Michael
I don't
Jordan,
want that for
the
her.
symbol of
I
perseverance.
want her to beat this
and live her
Sarah
life
walked
without
back
being
to the
defined
table
by
and
my
picked up her
involvement.
childhood letter, reading
Denise
her own
nodded
words
slowly,
written in purple
understanding.
crayon.
Grammy
When do you
said
want
she
to be
mailed
tested?
this. I remember
Tomorrow.
waiting,
Set it up.
hoping you'd read it. 3 days later,
And you did.
the results came back.
I did more than
Michael
read it.
sat in Denise's
I organized
office
a blood
as she
drive
delivered
for
the
500
news.
people.
Her face apologetic.
I funded it entirely.
You're not
but
compatible.
anonymously.
Your blood type isn't
We
a
tested
match
everyone,
for what Sarah needs.
looking for compatible donors
Michael
for
absorbed
rare
this
blood
in
types.
silence.
23
He'd been
people
so
registered,
certain,
hoping
so
one of
hopeful
them would match
that
you.
maybe he could be
But
the
in the
direct
end,
solution.
None of them could
The
donate in
disappointment
time.
was sharp
So
and
I kept
immediate.
trying to change my own blood
Okay,
chemistry
he
until
said
I became
finally.
compatible.
Then we moved to Plan
You
B,
organized 500
which
people?
is. Michael
Sarah
stood
sat
up,
down heavily.
his mind already working
me?
through possibilities.
For you.
We
Now,
organized
because
the
an
biggest
8-year-old
private
girl
blood
wrote me a
drive
letter
Chicago has
asking
ever
for help,
seen.
and
We
I
test
test
everyone we
can.
They
We
sat
find
in silence
donors
for
who
several
match,
minutes,
and
Sarah
we make sure
processing,
Sarah Chen
Michael
gets the blood
waiting
she
patiently.
needs. How do
Finally,
we do that
Sarah
without
spoke.
attracting media attention?
There's a nurse
Carefully.
who knows about this.
Michael began
Elena
pacing,
Martinez,
the same way he'd walked
She's
the
the one who
sidelines
drew
during
my blood
timeouts,
that night,
thinking
through
She's
strategy.
kept the secret for 28
I'll
years.
make personal calls to
But
people I
recently,
trust.
she contacted
Business leaders,
She
other
thinks
athletes,
it's time the story
friends.
is told.
I'll explain
Not
the
for
situation.
publicity,
and ask them to help organize and fund this quietly. Understand what real kindness press releases. Like. Just word of mouth. To tell you first. We'll rent a facility. Can I meet her? Bring in medical staff. She's waiting for my screen call. As many people as we can. If you want to talk to her, I'll arrange it expensive. Sarah nodded. Whatever it costs. I need time to process this. It's on already mentally organizing logistics. I understand. This will take all the time you need. Then we start today. I want you to know something. Sarah doesn't have time to waste. Neither does we. Voice intense. As Michael left her office, regret staying Denise silent. Called after him. Even now, you know, even after 28 years, just write a check to I believe it was the right choice. You Michael became Dr. Sarah Chen on your own Sarah's letter, still in not his because hand. Of me. Sarah saved hundreds of lives because you chose to. She asked me not because to give you felt obligated to pay me back. So I won't. The anonymity was out into the Chicago along with the blood, already making a mental list. But now you're telling me 20 people he would call. What changed? Behind him, Denise sat Michael at smiled desk, sadly, looking at the notes she'd Elena taken. Made me realize that there's a difference between protecting a child and keeping an adult from the truth. His drive, you don't need his intention anymore. You're strong enough, established enough, kind of determination secure enough she'd never in who you before. Are to handle this. This wasn't about winning a championship. Maybe this was about saving a life now. Not and Michael Jordan, she realized, approached it with the same fierce acts of kindness he brought to every impossible shot he'd ever taken. Sarah Michael Jordan sat in his home office at Michael's face, a list of names the number 23 and pin on her lapel. Hand. 28 years of her life slept. Suddenly inside, made new sense. Michael was just the anonymous donor who'd inspired her career. The first call was to David Chen, the hero who'd taught her perseverance, who'd grown up in Chicago's Chinatown, and now I don't know how to feel commercial buildings in the loop. I'm grateful. Michael had met him at a charity confused event 2 years ago. Angry that I didn't know. They weren't close relieved friends, that I didn't they'd know. Connected over their shared understanding of what that's it meant fair to overcome all obstacles. Of those feelings are valid. David, it's Michael Jordan. Can I ask you something? I know it's late. Anything. There was a brief pause. Do you still have my letter? Then David's surprised voice. Actually have it? Michael? Is Michael everything reached okay? For his wallet and opened it. I need your help with something. He pulled out Sarah's folded letter. Faded and I trust you to keep this between us? Years of carrying. Of course. I've kept it Michael with me every day Sarah's since July 1995. Not mentioning her by name. Oh, every wallet I've owned. An I read it sometimes when I need to remember what matters. Dying from a rare blood disorder. Sarah took the letter. The desperate need shaking. For donors with an extraordinarily rare blood type. Proof that he truly carried her words for nearly 3 decades. I want to organize a private blood drive, open in Michael chest. Said. Large-scale, really professional, she whispered, but completely quiet. I really cared. No media, Sarah no publicity, and walked around I'm calling the people I trust to help fund it, and spread the word through their networks. Then Sarah wrapped her arms around him in a tight hug. David didn't hesitate. Thank you. What do you need? She sobbed into his shoulder. Money for medical staff and equipment. Thank you for saving my life. Space to hold the drives. Thank you for the silence. He helped contacting people in the Chinese-American community. The girl's ethnic background means donors with similar heritage tears streaming have better odds of matching. You're welcome, consider it done. Sarah. How much do you need? You're so welcome. Whatever it takes. They stood like that. I'll make for calls tomorrow. Quietly, donor and like recipient, you said, hero and survivor. This is a good thing you're doing. Two people connected by blood and silence. I'm not doing anything yet. He finally replied, in truth. We're all doing this together. When they separated, that's the point. Were crying and laughing. The second call was to Patricia Williams. So what happens now? A hospital administrator he'd met during a Bulls charity visit to Children's Memorial. Elena thinks this story should be told. The third was to James Martinez. She does. Who owned a medical supply company. This is your decision. The fourth was to Reverend Thompson, from a South Side church. If you want to keep connections throughout Chicago's community networks, if you want to share it, followed the same share it on your terms. Michael explained the situation. Sarah thought about her emphasized the need for children fighting blood disorders and families desperate for donors. Every person she thought about the blood drives she organized. By 3 a.m, about Michael had made 19 calls inspired to donate. His voice was hoarse. She thought about his coffee cold. This story could have, momentum was if building. Told correctly. A network of Chicago's most connected citizens, she said, was quietly mobilizing not for publicity, around a little girl they'd never met to make either of us look. Meanwhile, across the city, people need to understand that anonymous finishing her shift at Chicago Memorial Hospital's blood donation center, and they need to know that the blood someone gives at 2:47 a.m. and the night shift change everything. They need to know that real heroes don't always want credit. Donors who came
Michael
at night
smiled.
often had their own
Then
stories.
we'll tell it together.
Insomniacs
But
who
Sarah,
wanted to do something
there's
meaningful.
one condition.
Night shift workers who couldn't come
The
during
story
the day.
focuses on what
People
you've
who
done with your
preferred
life.
privacy. Not just what I did
Elena
one
was
night.
organizing supply
The
cabinets
narrative
when her
is
supervisor,
Michael
Linda
Jordan
Chen,
donated
called
blood.
her into the office.
Yes. But
We've
Dr.
been
Sarah
selected
Chen
to
spent
coordinate
28
a special
years saving
project,
lives
Linda
because
explained.
of that gift.
Looking at a memo that
You're
had
the hero
apparently
of this
arrived
story,
that
not
day.
me. A private
Sarah
foundation
laughed
is
through her
funding a
tears,
large-scale blood drive
still trying to
specifically to
avoid
test
being
for
the
rare
center
blood
of
types.
attention.
They want to use our
Always.
facility. They spent the
Which
next 3
foundation?
hours talking.
Elena asked.
Michael told
It's
her
anonymous.
about organizing
The
the
funding
blood drive,
comes through a law
about
firm,
testing his
but it's
blood
legitimate.
repeatedly. The money has
About
already
Marcus
been
Webb
transferred to the
forwarding her
hospital's
letter.
account. They want
Sarah
to run
told
the
him
drive
about her
over
career,
3 days in late
about the
September.
patients she'd saved.
That's unusual.
About wearing
Why
number
private?
23 every day
Linda
without
shrugged.
knowing what it truly
The memo
meant.
says the foundation
When Sarah
prefers
finally
to work
left
without
the Hornets
publicity.
facility that evening,
Apparently,
she carried
they're
her childhood
specifically
letter,
looking for the
Michael's
Bombay
blood
blood
number,
group
and
and
other
a
rare
completely
types.
new understanding
They're
of
bringing
her
in
own life.
specialized testing
She
equipment
called Elena
and
Martinez
additional
from her
medical
hotel
staff.
room that night.
Our job is to
Dr.
coordinate
Chen,
logistics
Elena
and
answered,
provide the
her voice
facility.
shaking.
Michael
Elena
called.
made notes.
He told me
her
you
mind
know.
already working through
I know
what would be
everything.
needed.
Thank you for keeping
How many
the
people
secret.
are they expecting?
Thank you for knowing.
They're
when it
hoping
was
for
time to break it.
500 over the 3 days.
How are you feeling?
Maybe more.
Honestly,
Elena's eyebrows
complete.
rose. That's
Like I've been
ambitious
carrying
for
a
a question
question
drive
my whole
with
life
no
without
advertising.
knowing what the question was.
They're using
And now
word-of-mouth
I
networks,
finally have the answer.
community organizations,
Are you angry?
churches, business
That
groups.
we didn't tell you
no
sooner?
posters, no media
Sarah
coverage.
considered this.
Just personal invitations.
No. I think
As
Michael
Linda
was
continued explaining the
I needed
logistics,
to become who I
Elena
am
felt
before
a
learning
strange
this
sense
truth.
that something important
If I'd
was
known
happening.
at 8,
In 7
or
years of
18,
nursing,
or
she'd
even
never seen
28,
anything quite
it might
like
have
this.
defined me
A
differently.
fully funded, professionally
now,
organized
at
blood
36,
drive operating
I can
entirely
hold
in the
this knowledge
shadows.
without letting it
Who's the
overwhelm
patient
who I've
Elena
become.
asked. The one who
You're
needs the rare
remarkable,
blood,
Sarah.
Linda consulted
I
the
learned
memo.
from the best.
So,
Sarah
it doesn't
said,
say.
smiling.
Patient
From a nurse
privacy,
who kept a
I
promise
assume.
for 28 years.
We're just told
from
that
a
there's
grandmother
an urgent
who taught
medical
me
need,
faith,
and
and
that
every
from a man who
compatible
showed me
donor
that
we
true
find
greatness
could save a
doesn't
life.
need an audience.
Elena nodded.
Over the next
accepting
2
this.
months,
Elena,
in medicine,
Sarah, and Michael
privacy was
worked
sacred.
together to tell the story
Still,
properly.
she couldn't shake her curiosity.
They chose a respected
about who
journalist
had the
who
resources
understood the
and the
nuance,
will to
who could
organize
write about
something
anonymous
like this so
kindness
quietly,
without
The
sensationalizing
answer, of
it.
course, was Michael
The article
Jordan.
was published in
but
October
his name appeared on
2023.
no documents,
exactly
no
28
memos,
years after
no
the
funding
donation.
transfers.
On the headline
He'd
read,
structured
"The
everything
silent gift,
through lawyers
how
and
Michael
trusted
Jordan's anonymous
intermediaries,
blood donation
keeping himself
taught
one doctor
invisible.
the true meaning
Over the
of
next
heroism.
6 weeks, Michael's
story went
underground
viral,
network
but
grew,
not
in the way celebrity
Word
stories
spread through
usually
Chicago's
do. Communities like
It wasn't about
ripples in
scandal
water.
or spectacle.
Quiet,
It was
steady,
about humanity.
reaching farther than
People
anyone
shared it
expected.
not
because Michael Jordan was
In
involved
Chinatown,
but because
David
it taught
Chen
something
spoke to
profound
restaurant owners and
that
shopkeepers.
the best help we can give
There's
often
a private
happens
blood
in
drive
silence.
coming.
That
And
the
a
greatest
child
gifts
needs help.
create freedom
Pass the
rather than
word.
obligation.
On the south
That
side,
real heroes
Reverend
don't
Thompson
always
mentioned
need
it
credit.
during Sunday service.
Blood donations across the
Sometimes
country
God asks
spiked
us
by
to help in
40%
small
in the
ways
week
that matter
following
more than we
publication.
know.
Anonymous
There's a blood
donations
drive in
increased
September.
by 70%.
Consider giving an hour
Sarah's
of your time.
hospital received millions
In
in
corporate
funding
offices
for blood disorder
downtown,
research.
executives
But
received
the most
personal
meaningful
calls from
response
colleagues.
came from ordinary people
Someone is
sharing their
organizing
own
something
stories
good.
of
Bring
anonymous
your
help.
employees.
Tell
The
your
stranger
friends
who'd paid their grocery
Marcus
bill.
Webb,
The donor
mailroom
who'd
clerk
saved their
who'd
life.
started everything,
The teacher
heard
who'd
about the
believed in
drive through
them.
his church,
The friend who'd
he
helped
immediately
without
signed
asking
up,
for
and he
thanks.
brought 10 friends
The
with
article
him.
became a movement.
He didn't know Michael
reminder
Jordan
that
was
goodness
behind it,
existed
but he
everywhere
hoped
if
somehow
people
it might
looked for
help
it.
the little girl whose
Sarah
letter had
appeared
moved
on a
him
few
so
talk
deeply.
shows,
Always
Sarah Chen
emphasizing
knew
that the
nothing
story
about any
wasn't
of
about
this.
celebrity
Through
charity.
July and August,
It was about
her
choosing
condition
to help
continued
when
to
no one is
deteriorate.
watching.
And she spent
Michael
more days in
declined
the
most
hospital
interview
than
requests,
at home.
letting Sarah
Dr.
be the
Patel
voice
tried
of the story.
different treatments.
At
Buying
one blood
time,
drive organized
but they
in honor
all
of
knew
the
what
article,
Sarah
a
really
reporter
needed.
asked Sarah,
Margaret sat
"Does
by her
knowing Michael
granddaughter's
Jordan
bed every
saved your
day,
life
reading
change
to
how
her,
you feel
praying,
about him?"
maintaining
Sarah
hope,
smiled,
even when
touching
it felt
her number
impossible.
23 pin.
Sarah never asked
Yes
if Michael
and
Jordan
no.
had received her letter. He's still my hero. Maybe she was afraid
for the same
of the
reasons
answer
he was
when I was 8.
Maybe she'd
Because
already
he taught me
accepted
never
that
to
some
give up,
heroes lived
to keep
only
fighting,
on posters
to
and
believe
TV
in impossible
screens.
things. But she still
now,
watched Bulls
I also
games
know
when she
that
had
his
the strength.
greatest victory wasn't
She
any
still wore her
championship.
number 23 jersey.
It was choosing to help a little
She still
girl he
believed,
never met,
in the way only
expecting
children
nothing
can,
in return,
that somehow
and
things
giving
would
me the
work
freedom
out.
to become who
The blood
I
drive
am.
took place over 3
That's
days
a different
in late September
kind of greatness.
at a private medical
That's the
facility
kind
near
that
downtown
matters
Chicago.
most. 3 months after the
537
story
people
broke,
came to donate.
Sarah organized
So
a
they waited
special
in
blood
lines
drive
that
at
stretched
Chicago
down the
Memorial
hallway.
Hospital.
They filled
Elena
out
came
paperwork.
out of retirement
They
to
rolled
help.
up their sleeves.
Michael flew in
Elena
quietly,
Martinez worked
donating
all
blood
3
again,
days,
barely
publicly this
sleeping,
time to encourage
running on
others.
coffee and adrenaline.
5,000 people
She drew
showed
blood
up.
from a retired
The line
teacher,
wrapped around
a
the
construction
building.
worker,
News
a lawyer,
crews covered it.
a grandmother.
But the story
a college
wasn't
student.
about Michael anymore.
Each person had their
It was
own
about
reason for
community,
coming. But none of
compassion,
them knew the
and
full
the
story.
power of giving.
What's this for? Sarah
One
stood
donor
next
asked
to Elena
and
as she
Michael,
prepped his arm,
watching thousands of
a
people roll
child
up
with
their
a rare
sleeves to
blood
help
disorder.
strangers they'd never
Elena
meet.
answered honestly.
You started
We're
this,
testing to build
Sarah
a
said to
registry
Michael.
of potential donors.
28 years ago.
In
Will
the
I
middle
know
of the
if
night.
I'm a match?
No.
If you are,
Michael corrected
we'll
gently.
contact you. You started
Otherwise,
this when
your
you
blood
wrote a
will be
letter
used for
asking for
regular
help.
donations. I just
Either
answered.
way, you're helping.
And now, look what you've
the man
built.
nodded, satisfied.
Sarah looked around at
My
the
daughter
thousands
is
of
7.
donors.
If
At
she
the medical
needed help,
staff processing
I'd
blood.
hope strangers would
At
care
the
enough to
families
show
who
up.
would be saved by this collective
That was the
generosity.
refrain Elena heard over
We
and
built
over
it,
during
she
those 3
said.
days.
All of us together.
Parents thinking of their own
That's
children.
the point, isn't it?
People remembering
One
when
person
they
can help,
or someone they
but
loved
thousands
had
of
needed
people
help.
helping.
Humans
changes
being
the world.
human in the best possible
Elena
way.
wiped tears from her eyes.
At the end of the 3rd day,
I kept the
Elena
secret for
compiled the
28
results.
years.
And
Of
now
the
I'm so glad I finally
537
got to
donors,
tell it. 23 had
You didn't just
compatible
tell a
blood
story,
types for
Michael
rare
said.
disorders.
You preserved a
23
truth.
names went
You
into
waited
a
until the
registry.
right moment.
23
That
potential
took
matches for
patience
patients
and
who
wisdom.
needed miracles.
It took
Among
faith.
those 23
Elena
names
replied.
was a code.
Faith that
Flight
some stories matter
23.
enough to wait for.
Elena noticed it when she was
As
filing
the sun set
paperwork.
over Chicago that
She'd
evening,
personally drawn
Sarah,
blood from
Michael,
every
and
donor.
Elena stood
But
together.
she didn't remember
3
anyone
people
using a
connected
code
by one
instead of a
October
name.
night in
She
1995
checked the registration
by
forms
blood and found
silence
only the
and
code.
truth.
An address
Sarah
that
had
led
become
to a
the
lawyer's
doctor
office
she'd dreamed of
and
being.
a note saving
Contact
lives
through
the way
intermediary
hers had been
only.
saved.
That's
Michael had
odd.
learned that his
Elena
greatest
mentioned
legacy
to Linda,
wasn't championships,
Linda
but
glanced at the file,
compassion.
given without
Anonymous
expectation.
donor. It happened
Elena
sometimes.
had kept a promise.
People who
and
want to
known
help
when
but
to break
value
it.
their privacy.
Preserving a story
As
that
long
taught
as the blood
world
is
what
good
really mattered.
and the paperwork is complete,
The letter Sarah
it
had
doesn't
written at
matter.
8 years old.
Elena
Asking for
filed
help,
the registry,
asking for
and
hope,
tried to forget about
on
it.
asking someone
She
not
had no
to give
way
up
of knowing
on her.
that Flight 23
had been answered more
tested himself
profoundly
3
than
times,
she'd ever imagined,
hoping desperately
not just
to be
with blood,
compatible, but with
She
silence.
had no way of knowing that
not
he'd
just
spent
with
6
saving
weeks
her life,
making phone calls,
but with giving her the
organizing
freedom to
logistics,
claim it as her
funding
own.
everything from his
And
own
now,
pocket.
28
She had no
years
way
later,
of knowing that Flight
the silent
23
gift
was
had
Michael
finally
Jordan.
spoken.
But
What
Michael
it said
knew
was
the
simple
results.
but profound.
Denise called
The
him
greatest
the day
acts
after
of
the blood
kindness
drive ended.
are often the ones nobody
23
sees.
potential matches.
The most
she
powerful
reported.
gifts are given
The registry
without
is complete.
expectation.
And the
of
hospital
thanks.
has everything
And
they
real
need.
greatness isn't measured
But I'm
by
still
what
not
people know
compatible.
about you, Michael asked, but by
Though
what
he
you
already
do
knew the
when
answer.
no one is watching.
No.
Michael
Your
Jordan
blood type
had taught
didn't
the world
change.
about excellence
You're not
on
a
the
match.
basketball court.
But
Michael
on
sat
October
with this
17th,
disappointment for a moment.
1995, he'd hoped
At
that
2:47
somehow,
miraculously,
in an
he could be
empty
the direct
hospital blood
answer to
donation
Sarah's
center.
need.
He'd taught
But
a much
medicine
more important
didn't work
lesson
on hope.
He'd taught the world about
Okay,
love.
he said finally.
So that's the incredible
So,
story
we did what we could.
of how Michael
Now
Jordan's
it's up to the
silent
doctor.
gift of kindness changed
You
one
organized a
life
blood drive
and
that found
inspired
23
millions
potential
more.
donors for rare blood
Now
types.
we want to hear
That's
from
not
you.
nothing, Michael.
Where are you listening
It's not
from
enough
right
if
now?
Sarah dies.
Drop your
You
city
did
and
everything
country in the
possible.
comments below.
We'll see.
If this story touched
Michael
your
hung
heart
up,
and
feeling the weight
reminded
of
you that real
helplessness.
heroes don't always
It was a
need
feeling
applause,
he hated more than losing
hit that like
championships.
button to
On
help
the
us
court,
spread this
he could
message
control
of kindness
outcomes through
to
skill
more
and
people
will.
around the world.
But in this
And
situation,
subscribe to our
he was
channel
powerless.
so you never
all he
miss
could do
stories like
was wait.
this that prove
Sarah's
the world
condition
has more
worsened
goodness
through
than we
October.
see. The doctors tried
The
to
next
match her
amazing
with donors
story
from
is
the
appearing
registry,
on your screen
but the
right
process
now.
was slow and
Click it
complicated.
and keep the
Blood
inspiration going.
compatibility infidelity involved more than just matching
the greatest
types.
acts
of kindness
there were antibodies,
are often the ones
proteins,
nobody sees.
factors that
So
could
go out there and be someone's silent hero today.